And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Fox 9's election coverage. We have so much ground to cover tonight. We'll be giving you the most comprehensive look at the 2020 election, locally and nationally.
So exciting tonight. We'll have in-depth numbers and analysis on the presidential race as that electoral map, you're looking at it now, changes throughout the night from red to blue to gray. That's important. The U.S. Senate's balance of power also crucial to watch as Democrats try to flip that. And all of our U.S. House races and Minnesota Senate and House elections that could tip the scales here in our state.
On set with us tonight are Theo Keith, Fox 9's political reporter, and Catherine Pearson, our election analyst, who is a political science professor at the U of M.
And then there's our reporting team spread out across the state tonight, ready to cover the latest breaking news in all kinds of races out there, and they're all important. We're also at party headquarters for the Republicans and the Democrats, as well as stationed at the Secretary of State's office.
There will be numbers, and more numbers to analyze tonight, so let's get started with some of the biggest races of this election. Let's start with the Electoral College and where things stand right now. Joe Biden with 134 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 109. This is a race to the number 270.
Let's look at the popular vote. A lot of eyes on that tonight. Right now, you see it right there. Donald Trump up by 2 percentage points over Joe Biden in the popular vote.
Let's take a look at the state of Minnesota and where the vote stands at this point, and Joe Biden leading right now at this stage of the race.
How about the battleground state of Wisconsin next door to us? This is also popular vote. Right now, Donald Trump leading Joe Biden by 3 percentage points in Wisconsin.
And a big Senate race in Minnesota. Tina Smith, the incumbent, leading right now against Jason Lewis.
So what you're about to see here are some key congressional races in Minnesota. Beginning in District 1, Jim Hagedorn and Dan Feehan. A lot of money spent on this one. Right now, Jim Hagedorn up over Dan Feehan.
Second congressional district in the South Metro, Angie Craig, the DFL incumbent, and she is trailing a little bit behind Tyler Kistner, the Republican challenger.
And that big district in the western part of Minnesota, District 7, Colin Peterson, the incumbent there. His challenger, Michelle Fischbach, and right now, Michelle Fischbach, with very few of the precincts reporting in, up handily over Colin Peterson.
Yeah, polls just closing in Minnesota 1 hour ago. And in the 8th congressional district in northern Minnesota, the incumbent Pete Stauber trailing right now against Quinn Nystrom. Again, it's still very early in the night for Minnesota.
You're going to hear a lot tonight about those key swing states all around the country. Let's start with our own key swing state. Minnesota was put in that category with our 10 electoral votes. We have 10 electoral votes in Minnesota right now, and you can see how it's shaping up right there. 63% going to Joe Biden at this point, 35% to Donald Trump.
And then Wisconsin, another critical swing state, went for President Trump in 2016, 10 electoral votes. And right now the president has a lead with the votes that have been counted.
Michigan, also a battleground state tonight. 16 electoral votes in Michigan. You can see how it's shaping up right there. Donald Trump up over Joe Biden, 55% to 43%.
Ohio, 18 electoral votes right now, and the president has a slight lead again with the votes that have been counted so far.
And then there's Pennsylvania. We call this our problem state tonight. A lot of things going on in Pennsylvania in terms of how they're going to get the votes counted and when they're going to get them counted. So it's going to be very tight, we believe, through much of the night. But right now, as you can see, very tight. 1 percentage point separating the two candidates.
Florida always in play, 29 electoral votes, and right now it's close. The president is leading in Florida.
Arizona, typically a red state right now with 11 electoral votes, and you can see how it's shaping up there. Very few votes tallied at this point. Joe Biden up over Donald Trump.
Texas, typically a red state, 38 electoral votes, but it is close there tonight. We'll continue to watch that one.
State of Georgia, also typically a red state. You can see it there with its 16 electoral votes. Donald Trump leading Joe Biden.
Iowa was considered too close to call going into this election. Right now, we don't have any numbers because the polls haven't closed there yet.
In North Carolina, with its 15 electoral votes, that one also exceedingly close. It's been like that all night, folks, and we'll watch that one very closely as well.
And Virginia has been called for Joe Biden, and so we're still waiting for the totals to come in, but it has been called for Joe Biden tonight.
The state of Nevada out west there. Polls have not closed in Nevada, so we do not have any results there with its 6 electoral votes.
All right, so let's bring in Catherine Pearson for a look at the big picture here. So, Catherine, what are you seeing setting up tonight? We knew that some states would be very slow in their returns, and we knew some states would be very close.
Well, I'm seeing a long night and possibly a long day tomorrow as well. So far, no state has flipped from their electoral college vote 4 years ago, and states that are key to both candidates are remaining too close to call. And Pennsylvania, with its 20 electoral college votes, I mean, it's hard to imagine that that will be called anytime soon. And so depending on how some of these swing states go, we might not know who the winner is for some time now.
And Catherine, as we look at Pennsylvania, again, 20 electoral votes, again, so close in the state of Pennsylvania. And to your point, because they couldn't start, and they're also accepting ballots after today and think through Friday, we may not know until this state is actually called. Is that correct?
That's correct. Although, of course, we need to see how Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Ohio. I mean, there are many competitive states left still to go. And so, you know, there are many routes to 270, particularly for Biden. But it's shaping up to be a very competitive election nationwide in so many of the swing states.
Yeah, let's take a look at Wisconsin as well. 10 electoral votes went to President Trump. It was a close one in 2016. It's considered a close one there tonight as well. What have you seen shaping up in Wisconsin leading up to this election day, Catherine?
Well, the polls suggested that Biden had a lead. And whether that remains true when all the votes are counted, we'll find out. But he certainly had a lead going in. And so at this point in the evening, it's hard to know exactly which votes have been counted so far.
Let me just ask you quickly about Wisconsin, because Minnesota and Wisconsin share this perspective, and that is typically, if you use Wisconsin, for example, you've got Madison and Milwaukee, typically very blue, outstate Wisconsin, very red, Minnesota very much the same, the 7-county metro very blue, and outstate Minnesota very red. The question then becomes, can you still win either one of those states if you just win outstate, like Trump did in 2016, like he could do in Minnesota tonight?
Right. Well, it really depends on turnout. And Wisconsin is another high turnout state. Minnesota led the nation 4 years ago in turnout with around 74%. And so both in Minnesota and Wisconsin, it depends where the voters are who turn out. We know there was a lot of early voting, but it remains to be seen sort of what percentage of voters are turning out in these key precincts and counties across the state.
All right, Catherine, stay close. We'll be tapping you quite a bit tonight, so thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it.
As more polls close, we'll start to see more numbers and some more states being called as well. Let's go right back to the numbers again and the electoral votes. Right now, Joe Biden with 134, President Trump with 109, and again, this is a race to the number 270.
We touched on this popular vote before. Donald Trump and Joe Biden very close in the popular vote at this point in time, 50% to 48. Donald Trump up by 2.
In Minnesota, where the polls closed 1 hour ago, this is a look at the vote totals right now. Joe Biden leading at this point.
And we just talked about Wisconsin. There it is in Wisconsin. Donald Trump up by 4 percentage points in the key battleground state of Wisconsin with its 10 electoral votes.
And that big U.S. Senate race in Minnesota, the incumbent, Tina Smith, has about 58% of the votes that have been counted so far. Her challenger, Jason Lewis, in this race, a former congressman.
Look at some congressional races. Key to Minnesota, the 1st, the 2nd, the 7th, and the 8th. Starting with the 1st, Jim Hagedorn, the Republican incumbent. Dan Feehan, his challenger. This is a rematch. 55% to 39%, but still a lot of votes to count.
And in the South Metro, the 2nd Congressional District, the incumbent Angie Craig running against Tyler Kistner. This is a very competitive district right now. Tyler Kistner is leading this race.
The big district, number 7, Colin Peterson and Michelle Fischbach. This is expected to be a close one tonight, folks. So far, Michelle Fischbach up on Colin Peterson, but again, very few of the precincts in.
And up north, Pete Stauber, the Republican incumbent, is trailing Quinn Nystrom, but again, we're not seeing a lot of numbers coming in. I mean, look at how little those numbers are right now, 164 to 106. So we're still waiting for a lot of numbers to come in across the state in Minnesota.
Speaking of the state of Minnesota, let's look at some of those state races right here in Minnesota, beginning with the Senate, which right now Republicans have a 3-seat majority in the Senate in Minnesota. So people are going to be watching this very closely. Democrats only have to flip 2 seats to take control of the Senate here in Minnesota, beginning with District 44. That's Plymouth and Minnetonka. This is considered a very vulnerable seat. Greg Pullis, the Republican, and Ann Johnson Stewart, the Democrat. And you can see that's Burnsville and Savage area right there.
And this is District 56 with Dan Hall, the incumbent, and the challenger, Lindsey Port. Right now, Dan Hall is leading that race.
District 58, Lakeville and Farmington. There's one to watch tonight as well. Zach Duckworth, 66% to Matt Little's 34%, with about a third of the precincts in.
Northern Rochester, District 25, Dave Senjum, the Republican, Sarah Flick, the DFL candidate. Right now, we don't have any numbers to report in that district.
Let's go south on I-35, Albert Lee, Austin area, District 27, Dan Sparks, the DFL incumbent, versus Gene Dornick, the Republican. Right now, Gene Dornick up over the incumbent.
And District 34, we're talking about Maple Grove here. Warren Limmer, the Republican, Bonnie Westland, the DFL candidate, and right now Limmer has a lead.
North Metro on the east side a little bit there. District 38, Roger Chamberlain, the Republican, Justin Stofferon, the DFLer. Right now, Chamberlain up on Stofferon.
District 39, Washington County, Stillwater area, longtime lawmaker Karen Housley, the Republican, running for re-election. We don't have any numbers coming from that district just yet.
Taking a look at Minnesota State House races, starting with District 5A. That's way up in Bemidji. John Purcell, the DFLer, versus Matt Bliss. You can see too early to result that one.
Grand Rapids, District 5B, Spencer Igo and Joe Abeda running in this race. We're still waiting for numbers to come in.
District 54A, that's South St. Paul, Ann Claflin and Keith Frankie again. This is early. Remember, folks, the polls closed about an hour and 10 minutes ago. Some of these outlying areas will take a while to get those votes tallied.
We had so many absentee ballots, too. It takes a little while for some of these numbers to come in. District 55A, this is the Shakopee area. Jessica Hansen and Pam Myra, again, no numbers to report just yet.
And you just looked at Savage there. Jessica Hansen, Pam Myra, 0% reporting in there. Let's move now to House District 56B. Lakeville and Burnsville area. This is an open seat. Kayla Berg, the DFLer, versus Roz Peterson, the Republican. You can see Roz Peterson up over Kayla Berg at this juncture.
All right, I want to bring in Theo Keith for a look at some of these state races. And some of these are rematches that were extremely close a couple of years ago. So, Theo, tell us, what is on your mind right now as you watch all of these numbers come in?
Well, in one case, you talk about the state Senate races there, and we've already seen one flip. That is the Plymouth seat, Senate District 44, held by Republicans. It was an open seat. The DFLer has won it tonight. So that's one flip. Still many races out there.
Theo, when you look at that basically 3-seat margin in the Senate, which ones seem most vulnerable if the DFLers actually have a shot at flipping the Senate?
Well, that Plymouth district was number 1 on the list. The Democrats have checked that one off. Then you go to Burnsville, Senate District 56, and you just showed the numbers there. The Republican who holds that seat is up by a big margin, not all the precincts in. So the Democrats have not checked that one off their list. Then you go over to the Republican side. They hold a 3-seat margin lead right now, but conventional wisdom is they need to pick up a seat or 2 because they're going to lose potentially 2 or 3 seats tonight, and they are doing so in Lakeville. Again, not all precincts in, but the Democrat who holds that seat, Matt Little, trails by quite a bit tonight.
We have you right there by the big map, Theo. I want to let our viewers know Theo is next to the electoral map of the United States, and throughout the night we'll toss it to Theo as we evaluate how the route to 270 for the 2 candidates is progressing. So you're going to see that big map with the electoral votes for every state next to Theo quite a bit. So we'll rely on that throughout the evening.
Still a lot of states to be called, and we'll continue to watch it. Let's go to Tom Lydon at DFL headquarters. And Tom, a very different scene than what we're used to on election night because of the pandemic. So what's it been like there tonight?
There hasn't been a lot of action. It hasn't been a lot of excitement. I'm just going to be really, really honest with you. It's such a surreal atmosphere. You kind of feel distant from the action, and yet it's kind of flowing around you. But you can kind of register and gauge the excitement when someone comes on stage. And that's what happened with Representative Ilhan Omar when she got on stage. Literally all the photographers were right down there taking pictures. St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter is up right now. Not as many photographers, but it was really Ilhan Omar who had the first win today over Lacey Johnson. She was the first winner declared in the 5th Congressional District. And what she laid out was basically the progressive agenda. She said that's the agenda that will make America great again. What's interesting is almost all the Republican ads this session or this season against Colin Peterson, against Angie Craig, all used the riots in Minneapolis as well as images of Ilhan Omar. In many ways, the Republicans in every race tried to run against Ilhan Omar. I asked Mayor Frey about that a short time later. He's like, he described it as fear-mongering, and in his belief, it didn't work. But while I was talking to Minneapolis Mayor Frey, I also asked him about any reports of possible aftermath of this election, Trump win or lose, and obviously they've been preparing for riots, and that possibility. We all know about the storefront windows that have been boarded up. I asked Mayor Frey about this, and this is what he had to say. Take a listen.
We're making sure to monitor the intelligence that we have on the ground, and we're operating from an abundance of caution. But all signs right now, and I got briefed just 10 minutes ago, point to a safe and calm evening. Yeah, thank you.
And that's really the message that we've heard from other people. All the kind of worst case scenarios in this election haven't happened, haven't come true, at least not in Minnesota, at least not yet. I will say what the Democrats really are doing, we heard from Governor Tim Walz a short time ago, is really managing expectations. Governor Tim Walz says, get ready, DFLers. It's going to be a very, very long night, and I think that is probably true. Back to you guys.
All right, thanks, Tom. We'll check back with you in just a little bit.
Take a look at the results as they're coming in tonight, beginning with the electoral votes on the national scale with the presidential race. Right now you can see those numbers wrapping up. Again, now 270 is the magic number, 134 for Joe Biden right now, and Donald Trump at 109. Some key battleground states yet to come.
And let's take a look at the popular vote right now. The president leading in the popular vote so far. Still a lot of states that are still voting at this point.
And how did Minnesotans vote, at least for the votes that have been tallied so far? Joe Biden with 61%, Donald Trump 37%. Again, this is the popular vote.
And in Wisconsin with 10 electoral votes, and this is the popular vote there, the president is leading in Wisconsin so far.
A Senate race, U.S. Senate race to watch. Minnesota is one of them. Tina Smith, the incumbent Democrat, and Jason Lewis right now. Tina Smith, she is up over Jason Lewis by a fairly wide margin, but only about a fifth of votes have been tallied.
The first congressional district, a very competitive district in the southern part of the state, a rematch from a couple of years ago. Jim Hagedorn, the Republican incumbent, leading Dan Feehan right now.
And that second congressional district, Angie Craig fighting for her job with Tyler Kistner. A lot of ad time spent on this one, and it may be paying off. This is a very, very tight race, but it's early. Only 12% reporting.
Very early. We're still waiting for a lot of numbers to come in from across the state. The 7th congressional district on the western part of the state, the incumbent Colin Peterson, who has been in Washington for about 30 years, facing Michelle Fischbach.
Let's go up to the 8th district there in that Duluth area and north. Pete Stauber, the Republican. This is a district that does have a tendency to flip once in a while. Pete Stauber against Quinn Nystrom. Right now, Pete Stauber up over Nystrom.
All right, let's take a look at our swing states across the country, starting with Minnesota, a state that Clinton narrowly won in 2016. Right now, Joe Biden is leading. We know that all of Hennepin County is pretty much in right now.
And what about Wisconsin next door, that key battleground state? A lot of money, time spent in Wisconsin. Right now, with those 10 electoral votes, Donald Trump up over Joe Biden by 5 percentage points.
Michigan, 16 electoral votes, and this is expected to be another close swing state tonight. Right now, the president is leading in Michigan.
Keep this in mind when you look at Ohio. No Republican has ever won the presidency without winning Ohio. Right now, Donald Trump up by 5 percentage points over Joe Biden.
And in Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes where they didn't start counting those absentee ballots until today. They expect it to be very slow, but right now the president is leading in Pennsylvania.
29 electoral votes in the state of Florida. This is one that both candidates wanted. Donald Trump needs it. Right now, Donald Trump does lead in that state.
Arizona with 11 electoral votes, and right now Joe Biden is leading in Arizona.
Texas with 38 electoral votes. This will be a big one for whoever gets it. Typically it is a red state. Right now it's a red state so far tonight, 51-48.
Georgia considered a toss-up going into this election, 16 electoral votes, and right now the president is leading in the popular vote there.
To our south, Iowa. Polls closed in Iowa about 18 minutes ago. They're an hour behind us on their poll close. Joe Biden up in Iowa right now with those 6 electoral votes over Donald Trump.
And in North Carolina, it's considered very close there tonight, with 82% of the precincts reporting there, 15 electoral votes, and the president has a slight lead.
And as we noticed earlier tonight, Joe Biden has been pegged the winner in Virginia, even though those percentages don't wrap up, but they can tell by where he's getting his votes that they have called this race for Joe Biden with 13 electoral votes in the state of Virginia.
And in Nevada, where the polls just closed about 18 minutes ago, still no numbers to report, but the polls have closed there, and we might have some numbers very soon.
Let's go to Mankato to the south. Maury Glover there with Jim Hagedorn tonight. This is a race to watch in those congressional districts. Watch this one closely tonight in number 1. Maury, what's the atmosphere down there now? You've got one of the candidates with you.
That's right. We were in Mankato outside Charlie's Restaurant and Lounge, and that's where first-term Congressman Jim Hagedorn is meeting with some of his supporters today. Jim, thank you very much for joining us. And my first question is just how are you feeling? The polls have you ahead, at least so far in the numbers. How are you feeling?
Yeah, it's really a lot of votes to be tabulated. We feel good. I mean, we're really excited that President Trump seems to be doing so well across the country and putting himself back in a position to get reelected. That was the most important thing in this election as far as I was concerned. I think our race is setting up pretty nice. We'll see how the votes come in, but I think Republicans seem to be competitive all across Minnesota.
How did you spend your day today?
I voted in Blue Earth where I live, so that was good. Met with family, traveled up here to prepare, and now we're with supporters tonight, so we're excited to be with some of our core supporters. As you were out in the district, for you, what do you feel were the issues that resonated with voters while you were on the campaign trail this year? You know, I kept going around in person. I went to 60 cities, hundreds of stops just in the last few months. I never quit during the whole coronavirus deal. And what people were most concerned about is they didn't like these lockdowns. They were upset that their businesses were going bankrupt, churches and schools and everything else were being closed down. Really not happy with the Democrat policies in the state over that. And then on a more macro level, what kind of country are we going to have in the future? With President Trump and Republicans, we pretty much said we're going to keep going with secure borders, strong defense, an economy based upon free enterprise, and then protect your constitutional rights, right to life, right to keep and bear arms, right to religious freedom. And with the Democrats, it's pretty much transformational socialism, very far left. So we gave them a clear choice. I've run with the president, Jason Lewis, as a team, and we'll see how it goes. Now, the last time in the last election, just 2 years ago, you faced Dan Feehan and won by about 1,300 votes. And what do you think? We're thinking it's going to be a close one again this time. What's your feeling on how close it's going to be, and why do you think that you will come out victorious? I suspect it'll be close. I mean, they spent $10 million against me, so they're targeting the heck out of us. That probably evens it up a little bit. But in 2018, I was one of only 2 Republicans in the country to take back a Democrat seat, so we overperformed. This year with the president on the ballot, we're all working together. I think we've run a strong race. I think we'll prevail, but we left it up to the voters, and we'll see here shortly as to how it works out. And are you seeing in any of the returns or in your internal polling, are there any areas that have come back stronger for you or that you kind of weren't expecting but are coming back, that are kind of bellwethers for you in your campaign? Yeah, it's coming back kind of as we expected. The districts, as the counties, as we did last time, we're kind of picking up vote or whatever, but it's just too early to tell. There's so many counties that haven't even reported one precinct yet. So. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. And guys, like we said, this one is expected to be a toss-up. So we'll see again. The last election was decided by 1,300 votes. So in this one to go late into the evening, but we'll see what happens. But for now in Mankato, I'll toss things back to you.
All right. One to watch down there in District 1. Maury Glover, thank you.
Now we want to go to GOP headquarters with Paul Bloom and another tight district, the 2nd Congressional District. And Paul is standing by with Tyler Kistner, the Republican candidate in this race. And Paul, so many storylines in this particular district, it almost didn't make it on the ballot.
Like inhaling the thing. It's a fascinating race, right? With the election called off, delayed, with the death of the third-party candidate, then back on. The votes to be counted, not to be counted, what to make of it all. Tyler Kistner is joining us, a first-time candidate, right, Tyler?
Yes, I am.
And what do you make of this, of the situation right now?
I mean, there's only one way to make of it is you just continue to push forward. As a Marine, it was always adapt and overcome, and that's exactly what we did. So made the best of every position we were in and continue to push forward to this day. And I mean, as you're seeing the results, it was just over this weekend into today and yesterday, the energy that we had and that we helped create, really just giving people a reason to come out, and that's what you're seeing.
And this was a district before Angie Craig won, had been Republican. You can win it back tonight. You firmly believe that?
Yes, as everything's looking, we're looking strong, and I mean, I was blessed to have the strong mentorship from Congressman John Klein, who helped carry this district for so many years, and he has been a phenomenal help in getting us to where we're at, as well as the team we have around us. But, it just comes down to who the voters feel can be that best representative for the district and can really bring back that servant leadership to best represent them in their voices.
What are the coattails of Donald Trump looking like, in your opinion, in the state today?
I mean, it definitely helps, but as we were seeing with a lot of the feedback and numbers we were getting, We were really just running on our own campaign. As an independent thinker, I am on the Republican ticket, but I'm someone who is here to represent both Democrats and Republicans and third parties, and that's exactly what I want to do.
And you said regardless of what the vote tallies are tonight, this race is not over because of the court fights, and you'll be very curious to see how many blank ballots were left, what kind of transpired in those couple of weeks. Is that critical for you?
What I'm fighting for is to uphold state law and to make sure we don't set a bad precedence of changing election laws on the eve of election, as well as making sure every voter has an opportunity to vote for who they want to and what party they want to vote for.
Tyler Kistner, thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining us. We're going to send it right back to you guys in the studio now.
All right, thanks, Paul.
All right, let's go over to Tom Lydon at the DFL headquarters with Ilhan Omar. Of course, this is a race that wasn't considered very competitive, yet a lot of money was spent on this race, Tom.
Tons of money, $17 million in the race. First of all, congratulations, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, winning a second term. Quite a race in the primary, really. It was almost a, kind of a fait accompli, obviously. Right. But I want to talk about your speech up there just a few minutes ago. You really said that progressive values are American values, and that's what makes America great again. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, Fox News just did exit polls, and it showed, right, like 70% of Americans want Medicare for all. I don't think they expected that either, that was going to be the results of their exit polls. So, I mean, everything that we have been fighting for really is a priority for a lot of people. We have won the generational conversation on these policies. We just need to now convince Washington, the Beltway, on the implementation of these policies.
And yet, if you look at the Republican ads this season, they all seem to talk about, the riots in Minneapolis, the progressive far-left movement.
Right.
They even had your picture next to Colin Peterson, a total blue dog Democrat.
Yeah.
What do you think about the fact that you have been sort of the person the Republicans have been running against?
Yeah, I mean, Republicans have a women problem. Women have been the boogeyman for Republicans. They obviously have a race problem as well. But for many cycles, it was Nancy Pelosi. And it's no surprise now it's me or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But, I welcome it because I know that it's helped us boost turnout here in our district. For many of my colleagues who've had those ads run against them, it's helped galvanize their base because people are tired of having hate be the center of the political debate. They want ideas to be in the center of the political debate, and we win in ideas.
And I think everyone would say so much of the energy in the Democratic Party right now is coming from really the progressive movement. And yet here you have at the top of the ticket a totally traditional Democrat. Do you see sort of a contradiction there? Here we have a very traditional president, if he's elected, certainly party leader at the top with Joe Biden, but the rest of the party really seems to be moving in a different direction. How do you reconcile that?
I mean, so much of our politics these days cannot be analyzed. And I just believe that there is a disconnect in so many ways, and I think it is our job to close that gap, and we are up for that task.
Great. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, the 5th Congressional District, a winner tonight and a very early one.
Thank you
for your time. I really appreciate it.
Have a great
and
night.
There you have it. And I really do have to say, the energy in the room really did shift when she got up to speak. We heard from a lot of Democrats, even the governor. But when Representative Ilhan Omar gets to the front of the room, you saw all the photographers come down and start snapping pictures. That tells you something about the energy, I think, of the Democratic Party and where it's at.
Yeah. Even on a night like this where it's much different than it would be on a normal election night in a much more subdued environment.
Right, where people would be cheering in a room with results, and right now people are not gathering. Let's take a look at the big picture tonight at 9:28 now, the electoral votes and where they stand. Joe Biden with 134, President Trump with 109, and again, this is the race to 270.
On the popular vote, let's take a look at where they stand right now nationally. Donald Trump with 50%, Joe Biden with 48%.
Let's take a look at the popular vote in Minnesota, a swing state. Joe Biden leading right now.
In Wisconsin, very much a battleground state and very much in play tonight, or at least that's how it was perceived leading into tonight. But Donald Trump has maintained a 5 percentage point lead over Joe Biden since the tallying began. That's where it stands right now.
A lot of crucial U.S. Senate races across the country. Minnesota has one. Tina Smith, the incumbent, leading against Jason Lewis so far.
Key congressional races right here in Minnesota. You just heard from Jim Hagedorn down there in Mankato. This is where that race stands right now in District 1. Jim Hagedorn leading by 8 percentage points.
And in the 2nd Congressional District, the South Metro, and you heard Tyler Kistner with Paul Bloom a few moments ago. He is leading right now, Angie Craig, the incumbent, and still a lot of numbers to come in this district.
In the 7th, where Colin Peterson has held that seat for some 29 years, Michelle Fischbach challenging him, and right now, again, a very light number of votes tallied at this point, but right now Fischbach well ahead of Colin Peterson, the incumbent.
Up north in the 8th Congressional District, Pete Stauber, the incumbent, trailing Quinn Nystrom right now, but again, just a small number of the vote has come in so far.
One of the advantages we have tonight is with our technology to take a look at where people are voting for who in the state of Minnesota. And right now, Theo Keith is over at one of our maps to show you exactly where, and in this particular case in the 7-county metro, where voters are voting for particular candidates, in this case for president.
Yeah, we like to look at counties that have almost all the results in. It's harder to look at partial counties because you don't know where the votes are coming from. But when the counties are almost all in, you can compare this year to 4 years ago, and we can do it in 2 big counties now, Hennepin and Anoka counties. Here's Hennepin, 98% of the precincts are in, and look at the vote count. Joe Biden getting 516,000 votes in Hennepin County to just shy of 200,000 for Donald Trump. 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton, her margin of victory in Hennepin County was 238,000 votes. This year, it's 317,000 votes for Joe Biden. In essence, he is rolling up the vote count in the state's biggest county. Take this one off, go up to Anoka County. Again, 95% of the precincts are in, so almost everything is in. This one is very close. This county, 95,000 for each candidate. Why is this important? Donald Trump won Anoka County by 15,000 votes 4 years ago. He is underperforming in Anoka County so far tonight with almost everything in, so almost no room to make up here in Anoka County. Let's look at how Minnesota fits in to the big picture tonight. Of course, Minnesota hasn't been called, and really no swing state has been called yet. We look at Florida, Donald Trump leading there, Georgia leading there as well, North Carolina and Ohio. Joe Biden started off the night very well in both of those 2 states. President Trump has now worked that back to a 50-50 tie in North Carolina, and he's leading in Ohio. If the president wins all 4 of those states, that means Joe Biden has a much tougher road to the White House. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and then all the way over here in Arizona. Those are the states that Joe Biden would have to be picking up.
You know, Theo, we're expecting it to be a very slow go in some of these states, but you spoke with the Secretary of State, Steve Simon, about returns in Minnesota, and how confident is he that we could have some real numbers by the end of the night?
He said yesterday and reiterated again today that he expects substantially all of the in-person vote from today, Election Day, as well as all of the absentee votes that came in by today to be counted tonight. So we should know almost all of the numbers in Minnesota. Not the case in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Again, the 3 states that tipped this election to President Trump last time, all 3 of the states have very restrictive laws on when they can count their absentee ballots. In Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, they had to wait until today to start counting millions of absentee ballots that had come back. Michigan just got to start yesterday.
I'm amazed at how much detail we now can get on an election night, where people are voting and who they're voting for relatively quickly in the evening. That's very good. Thank you, Theo.
All right, we will go to Hannah Flood at the Secretary of State's office with a look at how the day has really unfolded. And Hannah, have there been any major problems? What are you hearing from the Secretary of State's office?
Well, I was able to talk to the Secretary of State shortly after poll close today, and he said, amazingly, there really haven't been any major issues. No big technical issues, no problems at the polls. He also pointed out they didn't have any big complaints or problems about enforcing wearing masks at the polls today. So he said he was just really pleasantly surprised. You know, it was so much kind of chaos leading up to this point. How are we going to pull this election off, pull off all of this early voting, all of the different court rulings that led up to this? But then he said today was just pretty quiet, not even those big lines at polling places because so many people had voted early. He estimates 1.8 million absentee ballots were put in before today, so that really made a lot of the polling locations a lot more quiet today than what we're used to on Election Day. Now, the Secretary of State's office, their job is kind of done for tonight. He says now it's really up to the counties to start tabulating their votes, and then they send it off to the Secretary of State's office. So at this point, they just kind of wait and monitor as those numbers start coming in. Now, as Theo was mentioning earlier, here in Minnesota, we had that advantage that counties could start opening and processing those absentee ballots starting 2 weeks ago. And Secretary of State Steve Simon said that that really makes a big difference when it comes to what kind of numbers we're going to be able to get tonight. Now, you would think it's the bigger counties that are going to have a harder time counting because they have more ballots, but he said there are actually a lot of smaller counties that might need a little bit more time counting those absentee ballots because they just haven't had the staff in the last 2 weeks to keep up with the big number of early voting that happened. But when we spoke earlier, he was confident that we'll have some kind of numbers tonight. Now, as far as that court ruling last week about absentee ballots that come in after today but are postmarked today, all of those will be counted but will be set aside because he says we're kind of pending to see if there could be any lawsuit with that. When I asked him if he thinks those ballots that will be set aside and counted could potentially flip the results that we get tonight, he said anything is possible, but it would have to be a pretty rare case and a really, really tight margin for that to happen. So Secretary of State's office is monitoring tonight, as we are as well, as these results continue to roll in. We're in St. Paul, and I will send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks, Hannah. We'll check back with you later tonight.
And Theo mentioned some of those key swing states, beginning with Minnesota. Let's take a look at how those are shaping up. I don't know that Minnesota is shaping up as a key swing state as it stands right now, but here are the numbers for those 10 electoral votes right here in Minnesota. Joe Biden with 60% of the vote to Donald Trump's 38%.
And in Wisconsin, where the results are expected to come in a little bit slower as they count those absentee ballots, right now the president is leading in Wisconsin.
In the state of Michigan, there are 16 electoral votes in the state of Michigan. Right now, Donald Trump up by about 12 percentage points over Joe Biden.
And in Ohio, 18 electoral votes. Right now, the president is leading in Ohio.
In Pennsylvania, this is one that we're going to be watching for quite some time based on how they're counting the ballots. Right now, Donald Trump, though, up 53 to 44.
Florida, 29 electoral votes, always a close state. Right now, the president has a slight lead over Joe Biden.
In the state of Arizona, with its 11 electoral votes, Joe Biden leading Donald Trump.
And in Texas, 38 electoral votes, and right now the president is leading Joe Biden.
In Georgia, with 16 electoral votes, Donald Trump up over Joe Biden by 11 percentage points.
Iowa was considered too close to call going into this election, 6 electoral votes, and right now Joe Biden is leading in Iowa, but you can see there's just a small number of votes that have been tallied.
And in North Carolina, 15 electoral votes on the race to 270, Donald Trump up, but it's very tight in North Carolina, expected to stay that way for quite some time.
Virginia called pretty early tonight for Joe Biden.
In Nevada, 6 electoral votes. That one just beginning to tally the votes, so no numbers yet in the state of Nevada with its 6 electoral votes.
All right, we want to go to Catherine Pearson now for a look at these swing states. So, Catherine, we had a bunch of states being called all sort of at once, and then it slowed down. So what are you watching tonight?
That's right. Well, it's slowed down, and the states that we knew were going to be close are indeed close. And in fact, some of them are even closer than the polls leading up to the election suggested that they would be. And so one question is, how much does this map change from 4 years ago? States to watch, of course, are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which we may not know about until tomorrow, but then also Arizona, also Ohio, also Iowa. So these are all states where, they're competitive and they're part of the path to 270 for either candidate. Another interesting dynamic in this election is $14 billion was spent on the presidential and congressional races in 2020, twice as much as in 2016. So clearly, both candidates knew it was a competitive election. The congressional races are competitive, and as incumbents are winning and losing, it's often in line with how the presidential candidates are doing in their states. There doesn't seem to be a lot of split ticket voting.
And Catherine, let me just ask you, because as we listen to the national numbers coming in tonight before we came on our broadcast, Some of the political analysts were saying things like Joe Biden has more paths to 270 than Donald Trump has to 270. Do you agree with that?
Well, given the number of states that were competitive between the two candidates, yes, that's the way it was. That's the way it looked going in. Though, of course, Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia are critically important to President Trump's path. He won them 4 years ago, and he really needs to win them again. But he's in the lead, and so as the night goes on and more states are called, it
well,
seems
speaking
that,
of states called, Catherine, I don't want to interrupt you, and I apologize for that. But as these states are called, we're going to jump on them right now.
Yes.
We have one.
Utah has been called for President Trump. So that's 6 electoral votes, and I think he was expected to win there, so not a surprise, but that's another state now in the western United States that has been called so far. There's the big map.
So when we look at the map now, Utah would turn red. You can see there it is right there. Catherine, you're still with us, I know, and that was a state that wasn't considered a swing state, but certainly 6 electoral votes for President Trump on his path are needed.
Right. Oh, that's absolutely right. And so as the night progresses, we'll see more of we'll see the earlier races called that are not as competitive. And then even so, in some of these races like Montana, not competitive at the presidential level, but its Senate race could determine majority party control of the Senate, with Steve Bullock, Democratic governor, challenging Republican Senator Steve Daines.
Next story, Colorado. That race was called earlier tonight. The two-term governor, former governor, Hickenlooper, beating the Republican incumbent in Colorado. Does that send any kind of message, or is that the one that they were expected? If it was going to be a flip, or at least one seat flip, it'd be that one.
Right. Cory Gardner was likely the most vulnerable Republican. And so that was the most likely flip. And then on the Democratic side, of course, Doug Jones was the most vulnerable Democrat, and that also flipped. So far, we're at no net change with majority control of the U.S. Senate, with Republicans at 53.
And there you see the numbers right there. John Hickenlooper, as I said, the two-time governor, running against the incumbent Cory Gardner, who, for whatever reason, didn't put a lot of effort into this race. At least that's what the political analysts said about it. And that's Hickenlooper right. Now the projected winner for that Senate seat in the state of Colorado.
And, you know, Catherine, you mentioned that Senate race in Montana and the amount of money that has been spent in some of these Senate races, like South Carolina, for example. So yes. Which Senate races are you watching?
Well, South Carolina has been called for the incumbent Lindsey Graham. We're certainly watching Maine. The polls closed a while ago with Sarah Gideon challenging Republican incumbent Susan Collins. That's one of the more expensive, closely watched races.
Let's look at some of these as long as we have you, Catherine. Let's
Great.
Start with some of those key U.S. Senate races, beginning with Michigan. We'll kind of go through them, and then if there's something that you want to comment, just pipe right in there, and we'll get some information. Okay, Michigan right there. This is a key Senate race. Gary Peters, the incumbent Democrat, against John James, the Republican. As it's shaping up right now, the Republican is beating the incumbent.
Right, and that was probably he was probably the second most vulnerable Democrat, but of course with many more votes to count.
And here's another one, Catherine, Iowa. Joni Ernst, the incumbent here. Right now with the numbers that have been counted, she is trailing, but this is expected to be a really close race.
And in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham seeking his 4th term in the Senate against Jamie Harrison. Not much of a race here, at least as it was shaping up. And Lindsey Graham, in fact, the projected winner there for that Senate seat in South Carolina.
Arizona, this is an interesting one. You have Mark Kelly, the astronaut, and running against Martha McSally. So, Catherine, what are your thoughts on this race?
Well, with 72% reporting, that's a tough deficit to overcome. But this was one race where Kelly was leading in the polls. I think his career as an astronaut was helpful. He's a moderate, and of course, he's married to former Arizona Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was shot and nearly killed in her Tucson congressional district nearly a decade ago.
You mentioned the state of Maine earlier. Susan Collins against Sarah Gideon. Susan Collins, the Republican there, seems to have this one in hand. This was not considered one that was much in jeopardy, and I guess we'd have to agree with that based on the numbers that are in right now when you look at that.
But still, for a state in the Eastern time zone, very few precincts reporting there right now. And then, of course, we already talked about Colorado, and John Hickenlooper has been called the winner in this race.
In North Carolina, Tom Tillis, the Republican, Cal Cunningham, the Democrat. This one is very tight tonight with 93% reporting in. Again, you got to keep in mind all night long, folks, North Carolina and some of these other key swing states, a lot of ballots won't get counted tonight. So a lot of these we will not have on some of these U.S. races and these national races. So keep that in mind. When you see reporting precincts up there in the right corner of your screen, It means something in previous elections, maybe not quite as much in this election.
That Senate race also mirroring what's happening in the presidential race. In Georgia now, David Perdue, the incumbent, running against Jon Ossoff. And right now, David Perdue is leading in this race.
In the state of Alabama, Doug Jones and Tommy Tuberville, the Republican there, the former coach, college coach. And you can see this one has been projected to Tommy Tuberville, the Republican. And Catherine, this let's just hang on that one for just a second if we can. Does that one surprise you at all, Catherine?
Well, the Doug Jones, Tommy Tuberville, no, not at all. Doug Jones won very, very narrowly in a race that was very filled with scandals. And so he was always considered on borrowed time as a Democrat representing Alabama.
And in Montana, Stephen Daines, the Republican, Stephen Bullock, the Democrat. And right now, the incumbent is trailing in this race.
Open seat in the state of Kansas, vacated by longtime Senator Pat Roberts. He'd been in that seat for a very long time. Roger Marshall and Barbara Bollinger there. Bollier, I should say. And right now, the Republican winning in the state of Kansas.
Let's take a look at Kentucky because this is Mitch McConnell's seat and he has been the projected winner already, winning with about 58% of the vote.
And finally, in the state of Texas, again, these are key U.S. Senate races right now. In the state of Texas, John Cornyn, the Republican, seeking his fourth term against M.J. Hagar, and that is projected to go to John Cornyn.
All right, let's take a look at the big picture again and the electoral map and where things stand because we have had some states called here, and so now Joe Biden with 134 electoral votes and President Trump with 115, and this is the race again to 270.
And what does that mean for the popular vote as we look at the popular vote for the entire United States? Right now, Donald Trump continues to lead in the popular vote by 2 percentage points over Joe Biden.
And we have breaking news. Another state has been called. New Hampshire has been called for Joe Biden with its 4 electoral votes.
Not a big surprise there, but let's go ahead and look at the electoral map, and you can see how things will start to take shape as we look at the East Coast there. New Hampshire will turn blue, has turned blue for Joe Biden. Again, that was just the projected win right now. And as you watch the totals now, that is how Joe Biden has gotten to 138. Theo? Not a surprise there with New Hampshire.
No, and again, these are all status quo states. This is exactly how the electoral map was shaping up in 2016. Everything is status quo that we're seeing on the map, either red or blue, exactly the same way that it was in 2016. We're looking again here at all these gray states: Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, and then, of course, the 3 that we've talked about before that are going to have all these issues reporting: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Minnesota hasn't been called yet. Iowa hasn't been called yet. Texas started off the night solidly for Joe Biden, but that's worked its way back, and President Trump is in the lead there. Certainly would expect him to win. And then Arizona being the major swing state out west. All of these other states out west are going to be, other than Nevada, but all the other states out west are going to be for one side or the other. But in some cases, the polls haven't closed yet.
Well, let me ask you about that. The perception of Florida right now, it is in Donald Trump's hands right now. A lot of those votes have been counted in Florida, but yet it's not been called yet. Any idea what's shaking in Florida? Are there key areas that just are too close to call that could flip it?
Well, I haven't looked at the vote count lately in Florida, but in some major counties, we saw the vote count be very similar to the last time. I actually thought about an hour ago, I said I thought this race in Florida was going to be called about an hour from now. That would be about right now. I'm a little surprised Florida hasn't been called yet.
All right, we'll continue to watch that. Thank you, Theo. And let's go ahead and look at the big map again and look at the electoral votes that have been cast so far. Right now, Joe Biden with 138 and the president with 115.
And on the popular vote, again, take a look at this. It's stayed very close all night long. Right now, Donald Trump leading Joe Biden by 3 percentage points in the popular vote, and that's the national picture.
And in Minnesota, considered a swing state because Clinton narrowly took Minnesota in 2016. Right now, Joe Biden is leading in the popular vote in Minnesota.
In Wisconsin, a battleground state, Donald Trump has been ahead of Joe Biden for most of the night there in the state of Wisconsin. With its 10 electoral votes, he continues to lead Joe Biden at this hour.
Big U.S. Senate race in Minnesota, Tina Smith, the incumbent, and Jason Lewis, the Republican challenger. Right now, she's leading in this race.
In some of those key races in the Congress here in Minnesota, District 1, Jim Hagedorn, we heard from him about a half hour ago. His challenger, Dan Feehan. Right now, That race very close. Look at that. About as close as you can get in a congressional race.
Hagedorn won last time by just 1,300 votes, so it is always expected to be a close one. And in the South Metro, you have Angie Craig, the incumbent, and Tyler Kistner, the Republican challenger. Right now, she's trailing in that race.
In District 7, Colin Peterson in that seat now for 29 years, being challenged by the Republican Michelle Fischbach. More numbers are coming in. Michelle Fischbach has continued to maintain a lead down there. If there's an upset in the state brewing, it might be in the 7th.
And in northern Minnesota, the 8th congressional district, you have Pete Stauber, the incumbent, trailing slightly against Quinn Nystrom, but again, just a small number of votes have been tallied there.
All right, let's go over to GOP headquarters tonight. Rob Olson is standing by live at the GOP, where apparently, Rob, a little more activity going on at the GOP headquarters tonight than DFL headquarters, indicative of absolutely nothing, I think.
No. The way that they have this set up tonight, it's more like a wedding reception instead of the typical kind of crowd that we see here on their feet, although a lot are standing now watching as the returns come in, but tables set up for people that have been, invited guests here to keep things a little bit more separated out. But certainly watching this intently, Kendall Qualls has got up and conceded in the 3rd congressional district in the race against Dean Phillips. But shortly before that, Jason Lewis, running for Senate, U.S. Senate against Tina Smith, got up there, and he expressed a lot of optimism tonight, as this night is still young in many regards, that there's a chance to turn Minnesota red, and that he has a chance to win his Senate race against Tina Smith, even though the polls show he's lagged behind, even though the votes that have come in showing him lagging behind by a large margin. He's also been outspent by a large margin by Tina Smith, but he made up for that by doing a lot of travel around the state. I asked him about what a strange campaign it has been for him.
It's been bizarre. I mean, you had a lockdown, you had riots, you had chaos. We traveled the entire state regardless. We ended up suing the governor, and then 7 days out, I get emergency surgery. What else can happen, right? But you know what? You just plunge ahead. I mean, if you believe in something, as I do, and that I think liberty's on the line in this particular election.
Yeah, so again, he expressed optimism that he can prevail here, but the tallies so far coming in show him with a sizable deficit against Tina Smith. But again, still a lot to come in yet, and a lot of optimism and enthusiasm here at the GOP party headquarters that a lot can happen yet tonight. They are, again, watching intently here as these numbers come in, and hear a lot of cheers as various state totals are updated across the country. But again, at this point, Jason Lewis hoping that he can prevail. The vote so far not in his favor. Back to you.
All right, Rob Olson at GOP headquarters in Bloomington. We appreciate it. We'll get back to you as soon as you have something that warrants some information for our viewers.
All right, let's go to the 7th congressional district, the western part of the state. And this is going to be considered a very competitive district. Colin Peterson, longtime congressman, who's in a very red district, and he's a DFL candidate. We have Sarah Danick, who's been walking around talking to people all day. So what are you hearing in that district tonight, Sarah?
Well, we've been hearing a lot of support for Michelle Fischbach, the Republican candidate here. This has been considered a toss-up congressional race, but so far looking at the results coming in so far, and only about 23% of precincts reporting, but Michelle Fischbach has held the lead this evening. We're at her event here in Spicer tonight. About 100 people. You can see a pretty festive mood, actually waiting for Michelle Fischbach to come down and talk this evening. We're told she's in her room here at the hotel, and we're planning to hear from her, though, in just a few minutes. Not quite sure what she's going to say. Obviously, this race hasn't been called at this point, but Colin Peterson has hung on to this district for many years now. 30 years he has served in Congress, and now Michelle Fischbach could change things around, and we're seeing her, I believe, walk into the room here. Coming in right now, you can hear clapping. She is going to be taking the podium to speak here tonight, but again, leading about 52% to 41%. Again, only about 23% of the precincts reporting, so still have some time here to watch those returns in Spicer. We'll send it back to you, and of course, update with any information that we hear from Michelle as she takes the podium this evening. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks, Sarah.
All right, let's move away from those congressional seats for just a little while and take a look at more of those state house races, beginning with the state Senate races here in Minnesota. The District 44, that's Plymouth and Minnetonka. This is considered a very vulnerable seat for the state. Greg Polis, the Republican, Ann Johnson Stewart, and Stewart winning right now over him. A lot of those precincts have reported in. This is a race that would flip to Democrats if it ends up with these numbers.
Now let's take a look at Savage, Burnsville, District 56. You have Dan Hall, the incumbent, Lindsey Port, the challenger. Right now, Dan Hall is leading in this race.
District 58, Lakeville, Farmington area, Matt Little, the DFLer, Zach Duckworth, the Republican. Zach leading the incumbent Democrat right now, 58-42.
District 25, this is Northern Rochester. You have Dave Senjum, the Republican, Sarah Flick, the DFL candidate. And right now, Senjum is leading this race.
Drop down the interstate, Albert Lee and Austin. District 27, Dan Sparks, the DFL incumbent. Gene Dornick, the Republican. Right now, the Republican leading by 2 percentage points.
And let's take a look at District 34 in Maple Grove. You have Warren Limmer, the Republican, Bonnie Westland, the DFL candidate. Right now, Limmer is leading.
Let's go back to Sarah Danek. Sarah Danek is in District 7 down there. It's won very close. Let's listen to Michelle Fishbach, who at this point is leading over the incumbent, Colin Peterson. All right.
Her comments were brief.
I guess she's done for now.
But
Race hasn't been called, so there's a lot more time to go. But right now, she's up by 10 percentage points. Michelle Fishbach over the longtime incumbent Colin Peterson. Again, a lot of votes to be tallied, folks, especially down in that district. So keep in mind, a lot of night to go yet before we can actually project a winner.
And geographically, it's such a big district, too. All right, let's go back to those state Senate races, those critical ones that are considered so close. And right now, the GOP just has a narrow majority. So right now, this is Maple Grove, Warren Limmer, the incumbent, a slight lead over Bonnie Westland.
In White Bear Lake, Hugo, that's that northeast metro area. Roger Chamberlain, the Republican. Justin Stofferham, the DFLer. This one is in the hands of Roger Chamberlain at this point, 54-46.
And District 39, Washington County, Stillwater. You have Karin Housley, longtime lawmaker. We don't have any numbers to report from this district. We might have to check to see if they're having some problems over there in Washington County.
Take a look at those state house races, beginning with District 5A up in Bemidji. John Purcell, the DFLer, Matt Bliss, the Republican. And again, too early to tally votes up in Bemidji at this hour.
District 5B, Spencer Igo, the Republican, Joe Abeta, the DFL candidate. No numbers to report out of that region just yet.
54A in South St. Paul, closer to the metro, and Claflin against Keith Franke. Right now, Claflin, the DFLer, incumbent, leading Keith Franke by a sizable margin.
And another area where we don't have numbers, Shakopee right now, Eric Mortensen, the Republican candidate, Brad Tapke, the incumbent. And we hope to see some numbers in Shakopee soon.
And there is Savage. We do have numbers there. This is an open seat. Jessica Hansen, the DFLer, and Pam Myra, the Republican. Right now, Pam Myra winning in District 56A.
Lakeville, Burnsville, District 56B. And we have Kayla Berg, the DFL candidate, Roz Peterson, the Republican. Right now, Roz Peterson is leading in this race.
Let's take a look at where we shape up. We've been telling you about how close the Minnesota Senate is right now. The Republicans hold a 3-seat advantage over Democrats, and we're watching that race very closely tonight. Theo Keefe joining us as we look at control of the Minnesota Senate.
So let me give you the lay of land here. Yeah, it's Republicans 35, Democrats 32 heading into tonight. Democrats' top pickup target was Senate District 44 in Plymouth. They have picked up that district. It was an open seat had been held by a Republican. DFLers have picked it up. So that's one in the DFL column. They would still need to flip one more in order to get the Senate. Any other flip opportunities, and there are several on both sides, have not been called. You mentioned the Warren Limmer race in Maple Grove. All the precincts are in that one. That was a top DFL target, but Warren Limmer appears to have held on to his seat up in Maple Grove by about 1,000 votes. So a very narrow margin, but one that Republicans are going to be celebrating tonight.
All right, Theo, as we're watching those numbers come in from the House, we're also watching those key congressional races.
And we want to go back out to the 7th Congressional District. Michelle Fishbach is with our very own Sarah Danek. Sarah, take it away.
Yeah, we have Michelle here tonight. Michelle, you just got up to speak to the crowd. I think you had been up in your room kind of hanging out. So how are you feeling this evening? You are leading right now in the returns.
we're feeling really good, but we understand there's a lot of votes to be counted yet, but things are trending our way, so we're very excited about that.
And do you have any idea of when you'll call the race, or are you just waiting for the Secretary of State to kind of make that final announcement?
Well, we're waiting for a few more votes to come in, a few more areas, and then we'll be able to call it.
And so how confident were you feeling, kind of coming up here to the final bend in the race? Was there a pivotal moment that you felt maybe changed things for your race?
I think just being out there and talking to everybody and shaking hands and making sure that we're talking and getting out in the district was very important. And we did a lot of hard work and made sure that we talked to everybody.
And what do you think about the overall mood of the Republican Party, of a lot of folks here tonight that came to support you? How are you feeling this evening as we're kind of watching the returns come in?
I think people are very, very enthused, and they want to see President Trump reelected, and they want to see Colin Peterson retired, and so they're feeling really good right now.
All right, we have your granddaughter here, your family here.
Yes, this is Miss Sophia, and she's 4 years old, and very happy to be here and watch Grandma.
All right, well, thank you, Michelle Fischbach. We appreciate your time, and of course, we'll be watching this race tonight. We have more precincts that need to be reported. I think we're about 23%, so we'll continue to watch those tonight, and of course, hear from Michelle as the evening goes on. Brandy and Kelsey, back to you.
A lot of attention and a lot of money on that 7th congressional district.
I want to take you back to DFL headquarters, where U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar, also former presidential candidate, is on stage at DFL headquarters giving the rally cry to those in attendance tonight. Let's listen in.
Confusion, and we must let these next 4 years be defined by getting things done for the American people. But to get anything done, we need to unite our country. I believe that Joe Biden can do that. I know that the governor works to do that in Minnesota every single day. And I want to make clear that to me, unity isn't about settling. It's about striving for something more. It's about figuring out what we can achieve together. Not the lowest common denominator. It's about reaching up toward a higher purpose. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. It is more than a motto. It is the North Star of our state. Today, for many, many, many people, this election will be critical. It's going to determine the future of our country. For so many Minnesotans right now, it is personal. My husband, John, is with me. He got through coronavirus after being in the hospital for nearly a week with pneumonia, severe pneumonia, on oxygen. And so many Minnesotans are experiencing the same thing right now, as we've seen our record numbers of cases. The governor is doing all he can to not just make this a safe place, which is why our message to so many is to wear masks, but also to make sure we can get on the other end with a very strong economy. I am proud of what we have achieved. I'm proud of the work of my friend Tina Smith. I hope we'll hear from her tonight when she...
You were listening to our Senator Amy Klobuchar giving a unity speech, a prepared speech to those in attendance at DFL headquarters in St. Paul. We'll continue to watch it down there and see what comes out of that. In the meantime, let's take a look at what's happening nationally.
This is Fox 9's continuous coverage of election night. Let's take a look at the electoral map right now, with many of the states having polls closed at this point. And right now, there are the numbers. Joe Biden with 138, President Trump with 115, and that is a look at the map as it stands right now.
Let's take a look at how those numbers are shaping up with electoral votes. Joe Biden with 138, Donald Trump 115. Kelsey just filled us in on that, but let's move now to a popular vote.
And here's where the popular vote stands right now. President Trump with a slight lead over Joe Biden.
In the state of Minnesota, on the popular vote side, Joe Biden handy over a wide lead over Donald Trump right now. 18 percentage points in the state of Minnesota here with its 10 electoral votes. That has been in Joe Biden's camp since we started tallying votes about 2 hours ago.
Wisconsin also with 10 electoral votes, a state that the president was able to take in 2016, and right now he is leading in Wisconsin.
Let's go to U.S. Senate in Minnesota. Tina Smith, the incumbent, versus Jason Lewis, the Republican. Tina Smith with a pretty sizable lead over Jason Lewis, and it's remained that way as those votes continue to be tallied.
All right, we have an update right now. This is the electoral map, and Looks like Joe Biden has 212 electoral votes right now. Again, you can see the states that are red have gone for the GOP, the states in blue for the Democratic Party. And let's bring in Catherine Pearson.
Yeah, Catherine, when you look at the West Coast, he grabbed a bunch of electoral votes there, but nothing of a surprise there. Joe Biden was expected to win the states that we see going blue there with their electoral votes.
That's right, and they were called moments after the polls closed there, just solidly Democratic states on the West Coast.
Any surprises as you look at that big map? We'll bring it back up for our viewers right now, and our viewers will look at that and see Joe Biden has 212 electoral votes, and Donald Trump has 115, so it looks like a wide margin, but a lot of those key states for Donald Trump have not been called yet.
That's right. So far, no state has changed from 4 years ago. And so the most competitive states are still the most competitive states, which of course at this point will now determine which candidate will get to 270.
Which state should we watch closely in the next hour or so, in your view?
Well, I think Arizona. Arizona is actually trending toward Biden. Also Ohio, which seems to be trending toward Trump. Iowa. Pennsylvania, with its 20 electoral votes, is a critically important state, but it's likely that we won't know who wins Pennsylvania for quite some time now.
Okay, so here's where it stands right now, the electoral votes. Joe Biden with 212, and Donald Trump with 115, and we are still waiting for so many of those critical swing states to give a number where it could be a projected winner, and for some states like Pennsylvania, we could be waiting a couple of days. But those are the numbers right now in the race for 270.
Interesting to look at the popular vote as this race continues tonight. Basically half of those precincts reporting in across the country. Donald Trump with a 3 percentage point lead over Joe Biden in the popular vote.
Let's take a look at the state of Minnesota and the votes that have been tallied so far. We know that numbers are in Hennepin County and up north. Joe Biden leading right now in Minnesota.
And in Wisconsin also has 10 electoral votes. Donald Trump up by 5 percentage points. We do have some breaking news in the state of Florida.
A projected winner in the state of Florida goes to Donald Trump with 29 electoral votes. Let's bring Catherine back in on this because Florida is always critical, and this is a big win for the GOP.
Absolutely. This was critically important. This was critically important for President Trump. It's been critical for Republicans in a path to the White House historically. And so he needed to win Florida, and he did. It took longer perhaps than he thought it might, but it is now in the Trump camp. So we will also see what happens presumably soon in Georgia and North Carolina, two other states that closed a few hours ago.
All right, we appreciate it. We'll keep tab on all of that. Let's check back in on that popular vote with Wisconsin is where we left off right there in the presidential race. If we can bring that one back up, you can see Donald Trump winning in the popular vote. 10 electoral votes in the state of Wisconsin right now, and Donald Trump up by 5.
All right, our U.S. Senate race in Minnesota right now, Tina Smith, the incumbent, is leading against Jason Lewis. But again, it looks like a lot of votes still need to come in this particular race.
Some key congressional races in the state of Minnesota, 1, 2, 7, and 8. Those are the ones to watch tonight. In 1, Jim Hagedorn and Dan Feehan right now. 4 percentage points separating those two candidates.
The 2nd congressional district in the South Metro, always a competitive district. Angie Craig, the incumbent, she's the DFL candidate, is trailing right now the Republican newcomer, Tyler Kistner.
And we just heard from Michelle Fischbach, the Republican challenger in District 7, taking on Colin Peterson, the longtime incumbent. And Michelle Fischbach is maintaining a lead in the 7th district.
Up north in the 8th congressional district, you have Pete Stauber, the incumbent, former NHL hockey player. He's leading against Quinn Nystrom. Again, we're still waiting for a lot of numbers to be reported in that district.
We talked about those swing states. They're becoming very important as we push toward the Midwest. Let's start with Minnesota and its 10 electoral votes right now. Joe Biden with 57% and Donald Trump with 41%.
Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes has not been called yet, and they just started counting their absentee ballots today. It could be a little bit slower there. Donald Trump is leading right now in Wisconsin.
See how Michigan is shaping up right now. Donald Trump and Joe Biden both spent considerable amount of time in Michigan in the last week to 10 days. Right now, Donald Trump, it's paying off. He's up by 11 percentage points in Michigan.
Ohio, 18 electoral votes, and right now the president is leading in Ohio.
In Pennsylvania, this is one to watch, folks, but we may be watching it for a while. 20 electoral votes right there. Right now, Donald Trump up in Pennsylvania, 55% to 43%. But again, a lot of late counting in the state of Pennsylvania. This one could go on for days.
Florida, with its 29 electoral votes, just called for President Trump.
And in Arizona, as Catherine just pointed out, this is one to watch. Typically a very red state with 11 electoral votes. But you can see at this hour, Joe Biden winning in the state of Arizona.
And in Texas, where some were saying it could be very close tonight, although it's a traditionally red state, the president is leading in Texas so far.
And Georgia also traditionally red, 16 electoral votes in Georgia, and right now Donald Trump is up by 9 percentage points over Joe Biden.
Okay, Iowa considered too close to call going into Election Day right now. Joe Biden has a lead in Iowa.
North Carolina also one to watch and very close. It's been that way since the very beginning, and take a look at that, folks. You can see 98% of the precincts reporting in again. Don't put too much emphasis on that because those mail-ins are going to be counted. Donald Trump up in that state by 1 percentage point.
Virginia called pretty early tonight for Joe Biden, and he'll get those 13 electoral votes.
And in Nevada, of course, their polls closed much later than ours. No results in the state of Nevada with its 6 electoral votes.
All right, so let's get a look at the big picture again with Theo Keith at the electoral map. So, Theo, what can we see right now?
We were speculating 10 minutes ago on the air, why hasn't Florida been called yet? Well, now it's been called for Donald Trump. What are the next states that I'm looking for to be called? That would be Texas and Ohio and Georgia. President Trump leads in both of those, all 3 of those states. North Carolina, he has a lead, but a very slim one. And so that one is certainly potentially some hours to go. And then we look, where's it going to come down to? Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona again, just like it did last time. Let's go over to Minnesota. Minnesota hasn't been called yet either. Even though some big counties are already all almost entirely in. You look at Hennepin County, for example. It is 94, 95% in. Joe Biden is rolling up the votes. He has a 323,000 vote margin. Hillary Clinton had only a 238,000 vote margin, so 95,000 votes better for Joe Biden than Hillary Clinton in Hennepin County. Well, that's the state's biggest county. Why hasn't Minnesota been called yet? Well, some issues. In the East Metro, Ramsey County only 2% in. Washington County only 3% in. Dakota County only 15% in. I was texting with a Republican source a little while ago. He says they're hearing of problems with reporting in Dakota County, so we may be waiting a while on those counties.
Theo, can you tell what's happening up there in St. Louis County? Of course, Duluth area, the metropolitan area of Duluth typically would be blue, but it's a very big county. So Donald Trump spent a lot of time up there leading into tonight.
It is 38% in, and right now Joe Biden leading, almost doubling up Donald Trump. The question, though, is where are these votes coming? Unlike Hennepin County, where almost all the vote is in, we feel very confident about what Hennepin County did tonight. Only 38% of St. Louis County is in yet, so I don't want to speculate about whether these votes are coming from Duluth or the Iron Range, where President Trump was hoping to pick up a lot of votes with some visits. He and Mike Pence both visited. However, I have been told the Iron Range typically slower to report votes, so we may see this margin where Joe Biden is almost doubling up Donald Trump in St. Louis County work its way down.
All right, Theo. Stay on it. We'll get back to you in a couple minutes with some more results. Appreciate it.
All right, so we want to take kind of a national look now. This is an election in a pandemic. We're a big country, and every election cycle there are issues and some hiccups. We want to go to Amy Hockert for a look at what's happening and maybe some of the interesting stories tonight and some of the challenges tonight.
Yeah, Randy and Kelsey, we're keeping an eye on some of the national storylines that are developing around the election. We want to take you first to Fulton County, Georgia. This is home to Atlanta, of course, the most populous county in Atlanta. The counting there really slow tonight because there was a water main break at the State Farm Arena in a room where some absentee ballots were being tabulated. Elections officials say they were able to fix the burst pipe quickly. However, it's going to take a little bit longer to count everything. They're talking maybe even 2 days. Now, they did say this is really important that no ballots were damaged in that water main break. So this does put them behind. They're going to stop counting here in about 20 minutes, hang it up for the night, and they're going to pick it back up tomorrow. But we just showed you 63% reporting in the state of Georgia, and part of the reason that we're going to be slow going there is because of that water main break. Also, it's going to be a long night in Wisconsin. Two of Wisconsin's biggest cities, Green Bay and Milwaukee, will be very late in reporting. The mayor of Milwaukee saying a short time ago, it'll be about 4 a.m. before we know which way that state falls. And she says it's partly because they count all of the early ballots separately. And then another developing story here that we've been watching quite a bit tonight. It's getting more and more relevant as we're seeing so many tight races across the country. So more than 300,000 ballots that were mailed in across the country are unaccounted for tonight. And they could be sitting in mail processing facilities right now. Now, a court actually ordered the U.S. Postal Service to do a sweep today of about 12 facilities across the country. More than a dozen states reported these missing ballots. We're talking about some of the big states here: Wisconsin, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Now, the Postal Service not able to finish the sweeps today because they say it would have significantly disrupted the Election Day activity. So they weren't able to finish. Kelsey and Randy, if these missing ballots don't get delivered and counted, we can look for lawsuits to follow. We'll continue keeping an eye on what else is popping across the country, and we'll bring you the very latest as we get it.
Yeah, becomes more pertinent as this race tightens up, too.
Yeah, and of all things, a water main break. You know,
it's 2020.
Would have been able to predict that.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Amy.
All right, let's go to Paul Bloom at GOP headquarters. Paul's been stationed there throughout the evening. Paul, how's the atmosphere there as we watch Minnesota gradually grow for a Joe Biden lead?
Yeah, I got to be honest, Randy, it's kind of kind of static right now, just kind of a waiting game. The room exploded about 5 minutes ago, of course, when you announced the state of Florida for the president. The room exploded. But you are right, those numbers are awfully wide. That gap at the White House level between Trump and Biden, as well as the U.S. Senate race between Jason Lewis and Tina Smith. Of course, Jason Lewis running basically as a Donald Trump Jr. In the state of Minnesota. So no surprise that those margins are pretty close and that they're double digits. I did just text with a top Republican official in the state. I said, hey, do you think those White House and Senate races will get closer over the course of the night? He predicted they would be close, but I don't want to read in between the lines of a text, but it didn't seem optimistic that he saw enough space there for those races to flip. So right now, obviously, in the hands of Joe Biden and Tina Smith running for re-election in the U.S. Senate. Now, earlier today, Kurt Dowd, the House Minority Leader, talked about at least Donald Trump keeping the race close in Minnesota, keeping it within 3 points, and with that sort of having the coattails to bring up everybody on the GOP side lower down on the ballot. So if that race stays at a 10-point lead for Joe Biden, you just wonder whether the president would bring anybody along in terms of this state potentially flipping red. We'll, of course, be here throughout the night until Minnesota's called, and we'll bring any reaction from the ballroom here in Bloomington just as soon as it unfolds. For now, let's send it back to the studio.
All right, Paul, thank you very much. Paul at Bloomington at GOP headquarters.
And let's go to Tom Lydon at DFL headquarters. And so, Tom, I understand that you've been talking with Ken Martin, the party chair.
Right, the mood is very low key, but there's lots happening behind the scenes. Let's not waste any time. Let's go over to DFL party chair Ken Martin. Ken, tell us, we know some returns are coming in late, especially Ramsey County, up north, St. Louis. What can you tell us about some of these returns? And is there a hitch in the system? What's going on?
There doesn't seem to be a hitch in the system, but it is taking long, and we knew it would take long. We've seen a lot of turnout, of course, over the states, over the many weeks now of voting, and we just need to be patient. We're certainly we want to make sure that every single vote is counted, of course, and so everyone just needs to hang tight. We're still feel really good, by the way, by how we're doing right now. So
it's early. I know this. All the returns are not in, but some of the trend lines don't look good. On the Angie Craig race, Colin Peterson, any thoughts about those races? And should we look for later returns that might be different than earlier returns? Your thoughts on those races?
Well, we must be looking at different trend lines because we're not seeing that in those congressional districts right now. Those are really early numbers, and it would be too premature to suggest that there's any sort of pattern developing either in CD7 or in CD2. We feel great about both Andy Craig's chances and Colin Peterson's chances. And so, look, it's still early in the night. There's a lot of votes still to be counted. We need to be patient and let those votes get counted, and then we'll have a chance to talk about these races for sure.
And I think it's an excellent point, but let me ask you about
Yep.
the big picture here. You know, some of the states that are falling are not falling for Joe Biden's direction. The math is getting increasingly harder for him to pull out a victory. Your thoughts about the national race here, and what was the miscalculation? Because I do detect we're not as optimistic as we were an hour or 2 hours ago.
Well, look, I still feel great about our chances to win the presidency. There's still a lot of votes to be counted, a lot of states that haven't been called yet, right? Including Michigan, including Wisconsin, including Pennsylvania. And if he wins all three of those, he wins the presidency. Here in Minnesota, it looks like Joe Biden's going to carry Minnesota. It certainly looks great, but there's a lot of votes to be counted yet. No one should declare Donald Trump the president. And remember that some of those states haven't started counting their early vote yet, including Michigan and other places. So this is going to take days. We've said that before. Right. No one should declare victory tonight. It's way too premature.
With that as the important caveat, and I hear you, do you anticipate that we will have filings along the lines of the 8th Circuit Court decision? As you stand here right now, do you see a protracted election season that could extend on days, if not weeks?
Well, it's an unknown question at this point. The first thing we have to do is to ensure that every single vote that was cast is counted. Once those are counted, then we can let the lawyers figure out the rest of it, right? Who knows what it looks like at that point? But it's going to take time to count those ballots. We've said that all along. It might take days, right? And people should be patient, let the process work, and then we'll figure it out from there.
Great. DFL Party Chairman Ken Martin, as you can hear, still very, very optimistic. Thank you. I know not all Democrats are that optimistic right now, but his word to us tonight is to be patient. When Senator Amy Klobuchar left the state, she had another commitment and she had to run. But I asked her, I said, you know, you seem very low-key right now when you said, I think Joe Biden is going to win. And I said, do you really believe that? What happened? And she said, and I'm telling you, I think she almost had tears in her eyes, and she said, I hope so. I really hope so. But I got to tell you, there is some palpable, real concern tonight that we may be seeing a little bit of a revisited deja vu of 2016. Back to you guys.
Okay, Tom, thank you for that update. All
right, you've been watching Fox 9's coverage of this election on a historic election night. Let's take a look at the map that Tom Lydon just referenced. That is the race to 270 right now, Joe Biden. As those western states were called shortly after the polls closed, Joe Biden jumped ahead of President Donald Trump by a significant number there, but none of those key swing states that the president is relying on have been called yet and may not be called for quite some time.
All right, let's take a look at the popular vote across the country right now as it stands. If we can get that slide up. Right now, looks like Donald Trump is leading with the popular vote, with about 50% of the votes that have been counted so far.
How about in the state of Minnesota? This is one to watch as well, although there has been a Joe Biden lead most of the evening here tonight, 55% to 41%, and that margin has stayed very steady.
Let's take a look at Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes, and as you heard Amy Hockert saying, it's going to be a slow go there. They just started counting their absentee ballots today, but right now Donald Trump is leading in the state of Wisconsin.
And in the U.S. Senate race here in Minnesota, Tina Smith, the incumbent Democrat, versus Jason Lewis, the Republican. And this one also, the margin has been about 10, 12 points for most of the evening. That's what you're seeing right now at this hour.
Some big congressional races in the southern part of the state. The 1st District, this is a rematch from 2 years ago, and it was a close one 2 years ago. The incumbent Jim Hagedorn leading right now in this race.
District 2, Angie Craig, Tyler Kistner, her Republican challenger. And Kistner, this is a race that Tom Lydon also referenced with Ken Martin, the DFL party chair. Ken Martin not willing to go there yet, saying there are a lot of votes to be counted. But right now, Tyler Kistner, the challenger, up over Angie Craig, the incumbent.
In the western part of the state, the 7th Congressional District, and this is a district that Colin Peterson has been in for 29 years as the incumbent, but he is a DFL candidate in a very red district, and right now Michelle Fischbach is leading, and we heard from her just a short time ago. She's feeling very confident about flipping this seat.
Let's go up north to to District 8. This is one that does have a tendency to flip once in a while. Right now, Pete Stauber, he is the incumbent Republican, leading Quinn Nystrom by 5 percentage points. This one is actually closer than many thought it would be.
All right, let's bring in Catherine Pearson again. And so, Catherine, as we look at the map and we understand that it will be a very slow go for some of these states that are critical swing states, I mean, do you think that we would know a winner tonight or even tomorrow morning?
No, I don't. And that is because it seems as though Pennsylvania, with its 20 electoral college votes, it's poised to be very important. It, of course, was critically important 4 years ago, and many of the states are trending in the same direction.
All right,
Arizona may be a notable exception.
You just mentioned Arizona. Let's breaking news right now on the state of Arizona with its 11 electoral votes called for Joe Biden. This was a state that they had hoped, the Democrats had hoped they could flip to blue, and they have done that. Joe Biden winning tonight over Donald Trump in Arizona. That was a Donald Trump win in 2016.
So just like the GOP celebrating that Florida 29 electoral votes, the Democratic Party now very happy to flip Arizona.
And Catherine, does this mean that Donald Trump has to take a state that he did not take in 2016 to make up for Arizona?
Well, it depends which state we're talking about. In 2016, Donald Trump had 306 electoral college votes, so he had some room to spare above 270. So it depends on the states, but say he could lose Wisconsin with its 10 electoral votes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And there you can see it, 11 electoral votes in the state of Arizona going to Joe Biden in the race to 270.
Yeah, so what were the difference makers in Arizona, Catherine? What did you see happening in Arizona for that state to flip?
Well, there was active campaigning in Arizona, and then also Arizona is changing demographically. We're also seeing Mark Kelly, the Democratic Senate candidate, doing very well in Arizona. And so I think with demographic changes in Arizona, a lot of mobilization of young people, of Latino voters, I think that was helpful for Democrats in general and Biden in particular.
You mentioned that Senate race in Arizona, and you mentioned Mark Kelly. At last check, Mark Kelly was up on Martha McSally in that state. The winner will serve the rest of Senator John McCain's term to 2023, and you can look at it there. And Mark Kelly has maintained a sizable lead over Martha McSally since they started counting those votes in Arizona tonight. That would be a seat that would then, in fact, flip in the U.S. Senate.
All right, let's take a look at all of the big swing states right now. So a few of them have been called, but we're still waiting on a lot of these, and we could be waiting for a couple of days. Minnesota, 10 electoral votes. And right now, it has not been called, but Joe Biden is leading in Minnesota.
And you heard Catherine mention Wisconsin, also 10 electoral votes. That one, 52% to 47%, has been in Donald Trump's hands most of the evening. But, Theo Keith pointed out that some of those cities like Green Bay and Milwaukee have not counted a lot of the ballots that would make this race important to Joe Biden. And Theo, you've been watching that, and that is the case in those two cities.
Well, Milwaukee County specifically, this was one that really Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election in Milwaukee County, getting significantly fewer votes than Barack Obama had in 2008 and in 2012. That county will not be in until 4 or 5 in the morning, county election officials say. So a lot of time to wait in Wisconsin, and potentially even longer to wait in Michigan and Pennsylvania, where results may not be fully in until Thursday or maybe Friday.
All right. In breaking news, we do have Mark Kelly was the projected winner. This race has been called in Arizona. So not a surprise because he has been leading since the polls closed, and because the state was also called for Joe Biden.
And it does play into the control of the U.S. Senate as we look at that. Again, Republicans had the margin as the night started, and right now you can see how it's shaping up right now with that control of the U.S. Senate. And that seat in Arizona was a very important one, Theo.
It was, and but there are more to go. You see there, 45-42. Neither party has control of the U.S. Senate right now. We still got a lot of races up for grabs tonight.
All right, let's go back to those swing states. Let's talk about Michigan. And Michigan started counting some of their absentee ballots yesterday. This is Wisconsin. Now we go on to Michigan here. I worked in Michigan in the 2000 election cycle. Theo, you're from Michigan. It's such a critical swing state every 4 years. The crush of candidate visits it's just daily, multiple visits every day. So tell us what's going on in Michigan.
Yeah, there were 14 visits in the last week to Pennsylvania, 9 to Michigan. It was second. Nobody else had more than 6. Michigan was critical for Joe Biden because, well, if you don't get the ball rolling down the hill, you're never going to get it to the bottom of the hill. Michigan is where he polled the best, and it's where he critically needs to win in order to get that ball rolling toward 270 votes. I'm curious, Catherine Pearson, in Arizona, I was surprised this state, not surprised this state flipped, but surprised it was called before so many of the other swing states. You surprised by that?
Because, of course, the polls were closed later than the other states, and we were expecting, with early votes already being counted in, say, Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina, to know about those states early on. And we do know Florida now, but it just shows how close they are.
Catherine, how does this change in that? Let's bring up the big electoral map, and we'll talk about that as I ask this question here. How does the win in Arizona for Joe Biden change anything, either for Joe Biden in terms of his path or paths, or Donald Trump for that matter?
Well, if this is the only state that flips from 4 years ago, that means that Trump still wins. And so it's one more state for Biden, but it really means that, you know, one of those states, well, Pennsylvania is really critical with its 20 electoral college votes. And then, of course, we also still have one of Nebraska's electoral college votes, which I know it's just one, but people are starting to talk about is that they're the possibility of a 270 or 269 vote outcome here because of that one, because of the way that Nebraska does its electoral college votes. They have both their statewide electoral college votes and then one for each congressional district.
All right, let's bring it back to Minnesota in Congressional District 6. Tom Emmer, the Republican incumbent, is speaking now. This was not a race that was considered much of a race at all. He wasn't expected to lose. Let's listen in.
Is hanging in the balance. Tyler's done a great job, and that's a potential pickup for us. Lacey Johnson's been a great candidate as well in Minneapolis. But I'm going to tell you all, Michelle Fischbach is going to be the next representative from Minnesota's 7th Congressional District. So let's hang in there tonight. You guys have all done a great job. Jennifer, you and your team, Kevin Poindexter and the Trump team, you guys have been outstanding. Let's make sure we deliver these new members of Congress, and let's turn Minnesota red. Let's also, by the way, send Jason Lewis to the Senate. Thank you all, Jennifer. Appreciate the time.
All right, there it is, Tom Emmer speaking to his party, and he mentioned Jennifer Carnahan, the Republican Party chair, and all the candidates that are sitting back and watching, and he was very optimistic about some of those congressional districts, particularly the 7th, where Michelle Fischbach is winning right now.
And we're going to see a lot of this tonight. He was speaking virtually, and a lot of the candidates have said that they will address the public from Facebook or some other virtual platform. Okay, let's take a look at some more swing states. Ohio, 18 electoral votes. The counting has been slow there, so we'll continue to watch Ohio.
Nothing like Pennsylvania, though, with its 20 electoral votes. Pennsylvania is on the list of those states where we may not know exactly how that one's going to shake down officially for quite some time. But at this point, Donald Trump leading Joe Biden with quite a margin there.
Florida has been called for Donald Trump, 29 electoral votes. And I'd like to bring in Theo and Catherine again. In Florida, did you see any differences in this election year compared to 2016 for the president's win? And you may not have had time to break down county by county. I certainly understand that, but just curious.
So I looked county by county a little while ago. What was interesting was in so many counties, President Trump's margin of victory was remarkably stable from 2016 until now. Of course, a stable margin, having won 4 years ago, means good signs for you. One place he did much better, and at least the early results, I don't know if this has held in the last 30 minutes or so, I suspect it has, is in Miami-Dade County, heavily Democratic county. President Trump got only about a third of the vote last time around. He got 45% of the vote this time around. Again, that was early, but I suspect the results have continued to hold, or else Florida would not have been called as early as it was.
And Catherine, on that front, there was some early analysis of the voting in Miami-Dade County and some other counties there in South Florida that President Donald Trump was doing better with the Hispanic vote than he may have done in 2016. Has that played out? Yes,
From early returns, it looks like that is correct, that President Trump did better than he did 4 years ago with Latinos, Hispanic men in particular. And part of that, I think, is an appeal to Cuban-American voters. But I think we're seeing that in other states as well, that Latino men are more supportive of Trump than they have been in the past, even if Latinos are overall more supportive of Biden.
All right, we appreciate it. Both of you, please stand by. Theo Keith, you've got some breaking information over there on the state of Minnesota. Let's check in.
Yeah, a lot of votes have just come in. Results have just come in Minnesota. We talk about Hennepin County, 100% now in And Anoka County now 100% in. More results coming in Washington and Dakota counties. If there was some issue with reporting there, they seem to have fixed it because now we're getting a significant swath of results in the 7-county metro.
That's good news.
Thank you, Theo.
Okay, we want to go out to GOP headquarters. Paul Bloom is with Jennifer Carnahan, the party chair. And so, Paul, we'll just let you go ahead and talk with her and tell us what's happening there.
Well, I asked Jennifer what she wanted to hit right off the top. She told me it's up to me. We see the early spread in the White House race here in Minnesota. It's about a 10-point gap between Biden and Trump. We're also seeing that in the U.S. Senate race. Are you concerned with about 50% precincts in at this point?
Well, the larger counties like Hennepin County, Ramsey County, right, that we wouldn't expect the president to do as well in, have come in, and we're still waiting on some other counties in greater Minnesota. So we'll see how those unfold as those results come in kind of over the rest of the night.
The national numbers must have you excited. The president's been called in Florida, seems to be up in some other key states, Pennsylvania. He's lost Arizona, but where are you nationally? Where is this? Where are we trending?
Nationally, we look like another 4 years is coming pretty darn quick for this president. We're very excited about that.
I talked to Kurt Dowd, the House Minority Leader, today, and we'll see what ends up happening in that race in the White House. But he talked about the president keeping it close in Minnesota, and that would lift all Republican candidates in the state, including at the House level, where he'd love to take over the majority. Do you see any coattails with the president? I know his numbers right now aren't there, but do you see anything, any momentum there?
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of that is in some of these seats in greater Minnesota that we're still waiting on returns to come in for. You know, the Metro, unfortunately, the 3rd Congressional District has just tended to shift a little bit blue over the past 2 election cycles, so this didn't come as a surprise. Obviously, we would have loved to win some of those seats back, but it is what it is this election cycle, so we're going to continue to watch greater Minnesota as the night goes on.
Any specific counties or just broadly across the range of rural Minnesota?
You know, up in the northern part of the state, we're looking at Beltrami County. Scott County has always been a strong one for us. Carver County kind of in the metro area. And then in southern Minnesota, there's some counties as well, Nicollet, Blue Earth, and other areas that we always sort of watch.
And the president put so much emphasis on the Iron Range, northern Minnesota, with him and Pence visiting several times. Are those numbers still out? I haven't looked at the
Yeah, I haven't seen those numbers fully come in yet. Last time I had checked, but things are refreshing more quickly now.
Right.
So I'm sure we'll get an update on that soon. But we're seeing some very encouraging signs. Michelle Fishbach is looking very strong out in the 7th. My husband Jim Hagedorn in the 1st. He's overperforming what he did 2 years ago in a very difficult year for Republicans. So those are positive signs.
And Jennifer, I don't know if you talked to your other party chair people in other states. Do you think we'll have a winner declared by the end of the night, or is this a several-day process?
I think based on what we're seeing so far, we should be pretty darn close to having a winner declared tonight, and would be optimistic that we're able to do that as a country.
And that count to 270, that's what you're watching. Any other just final thoughts before we let you go at this point?
No, we'll just continue to watch the returns, but we're seeing great news out of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Florida obviously was a big one, so that feels good. And, you know, the president has worked really hard, and I think he earned the support and trust of Americans over the past 4 years.
So if he goes on to win to the White House of another 4 years but lose in Minnesota, where would Jennifer Carnahan's head be after that?
You know, I'm focused on tonight, so trying to get through tonight first, and then maybe a week of sleep after that.
There you go. Jennifer, thanks for stopping and joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Jennifer Carnahan, the Republican Party chair. Again, some reason for optimism here, particularly as the president is performing nationally. The numbers not looking quite so good here in Minnesota at this point, but as you heard, she's waiting to hear from all those outstate precincts and counties before she gives up any hope of this president flipping Minnesota red for the first time since 1972. I'll send it back to the studio.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
And as long as we're talking about the presidential race nationally, let's take a look at the electoral race to 270. Right now, Joe Biden leading President Trump 223 to 148. Keep in mind, folks, it's early. There are a lot of key states that have yet to tally their votes.
Now, the popular vote, as it stands right now, Joe Biden leading in the popular vote. Again, though, but we are waiting for a lot of numbers to come in.
And you mentioned, we heard Paul Bloom mention, and Jennifer Carnahan, Minnesota. Joe Biden has been up in Minnesota by about a 10 or 12-point margin throughout the night. He remains there at this hour.
10 electoral votes in Wisconsin. We saw long lines for polling sites there today, and they just started voting or counting their absentee ballots. But right now, Donald Trump is leading in Wisconsin.
That U.S. Senate seat here in Minnesota, Tina Smith and Jason Lewis This one also has been about a 10-point margin for most of the night. It remains there right now, as you can see.
In the 1st Congressional District in the southern part of the state, Jim Hagedorn, the incumbent, is leading right now. This is a rematch from 2 years ago when it was a really close race.
In the 2nd District, Angie Craig, the incumbent, Tyler Kistner, giving her a race. Look at that, 51% to 43%, the incumbent at this point behind the challenger.
And in the 7th District in the western part of the state, Michelle Fischbach running against longtime Congressman Colin Peterson. He's a DFL candidate in a very red district, and she's trying to flip that district to a GOP district, so we'll continue to watch.
And up in Minnesota District 8, there up in the northern part of Minnesota, Pete Stauber, the Republican, being challenged by Quinn Nystrom. This one, 51% for the incumbent to 44% for the challenger.
All right, let's take a look at some of these critical Senate races. The GOP has a small majority right now in the state Senate. In the District 44 area of Plymouth, Minnetonka, you have Greg Pullis versus Ann Johnson Stewart right now, and Ann Johnson Stewart is leading.
Savage, Burnsville, Dan Hall, the Republican, and Lindsey Port, the Democrat. District 56 right now, Dan Hall ahead, maintaining his seat in the state Senate.
District 58, Lakeville, Farmington, Matt Little, the DFL candidate, Zach Duckworth, the Republican candidate, and right now Duckworth is leading.
Northern part of Rochester there, Minnesota Senate District 25, Dave Senjum, the Republican, Sarah Flick, the DFLer, Senjum leading over Flick.
And in District 27, Albert Lee, Austin, Dan Sparks, the DFL candidate, running against Gene Dornick, and right now Dornick is leading.
District 34, that's Maple Grove, Warren Limmer, the Republican, Bonnie Westland, the DFLer. Right now, Limmer leading, but it's close in District 34.
White Bear Lake, Hugo, Lino Lakes area, Roger Chamberlain, the Republican, Justin Stofferin, the DFL candidate, and right now Chamberlain is leading in this race.
And finally, District 39, Washington County, Stillwater. This is one of those that was late to come in, but they are finally getting some results in. Karn Housley holding on to her seat in the state Senate. They're 52% to 48%.
All right, let's take a look at some of the House races that were very close last time around and will continue to probably be close this time. District 5A, Bemidji. This is another rematch. John Purcell, the DFL candidate, versus Matt Bliss, and right now Bliss is leading.
And an open seat in District 5B, Spencer Igo, the Republican, Joe Abeda, the DFLer. This was left vacant by Sandy Lehman. She'd been there quite some time. Right now, Igo ahead handily up there in that district.
District 54A, another rematch in South St. Paul. Ann Clappin, the DFL candidate, versus Keith Franke, the Republican. Right now, Franke is leading.
In 55A, that Shakopee area, Brad Tabke, the DFLer, Eric Mortensen, the Republican, and too early, no results coming in from District 55A. That's a bit of a query, but we'll try and figure that one out.
Yeah, we might just need to see if they've had some problems there. All right, in the Savage area, you have Pam Myra versus Jessica Hansen, and a small number of returns have come in. Right now, Pam Myra is leading in that race.
That an open seat as well as this one, District 56B, Lakeville and Burnsville. Kayla Berg, the DFLer, Roz Peterson, the Republican. Right now, the Republican leading in that seat.
All right, so let's talk about the balance of power in the state legislature. And so let's go to Theo Keith. And, you know, some of these races were very close the last time around, and the Republicans have a small majority in the Senate. So what are you looking at specifically tonight?
Well, a whole bunch of seats in the state legislature were won in 2018 by 400 or 500 votes. That puts the GOP's grasp on the state Senate in pretty tenuous hands. They would tell you that the DFL's grasp on the House, even though they have a wider margin, is pretty tenuous as well. But the bottom line is not very many votes in not very many districts could flip either the House or Senate.
And just give us a number there so our viewers can get a handle on that. In the House, it's what, 16? And Democratic lead, and in the Senate, it's 3 Republicans?
Yeah, Republicans need to flip 9 seats in the House. Democrats need to flip only 2 seats in the Senate in order to take back those 2 chambers.
Okay. What do you see happening there? I mean, as we're going through these numbers, I see quite a few challengers on the Republican side, especially in the House, seem to be leading over Democrats.
And in the Senate, one official flip in Plymouth, we've been talking about this all night, it was the DFL's top flip opportunity, Republican held seat. Democrats have won that. But as of right now, no other flips to report. Now, in a lot of districts, simply we don't have all the results, and in many districts, you just rolled through the numbers. We don't have very many of the results. If I can flip over to the presidential race for a minute here, we've got a lot of results coming in the 7-county metro. You know by now, I'd like to talk about counties where 100% or almost all of the votes are in, and we have a substantial number of counties where that's the case. Of course, Hennepin County, Joe Biden is way overperforming Hillary Clinton, getting almost 100,000 extra votes in Hennepin County alone than Hillary Clinton did. Anoka County, President Trump is underperforming here, 100% in again. He won this county by 18,000 votes last time, only 4,000 this time. Washington County, Donald Trump is losing Washington County by 10,000. He lost it by only 3,000 last time, 92% in. Carver County, Donald Trump winning by 3,000. He won by 8,000 4 years ago. So a big underperformance by President Trump in the 7-county metro here in Minnesota. That is why he is trailing by so much right now. No official call yet in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think his campaign thought this state would be much closer. And as you pointed out earlier in the week, Theo, he needed to do well, better than he did in 2016 in outstate Minnesota,
Yes.
which includes some of those areas you referenced there, because we knew he would not take the 7-county metro.
Yeah, so he's underperforming in the 7-county metro. How about greater Minnesota? Well, we look at Blue Earth County. That's Mankato. He flipped this county 4 years ago. It has flipped back to Joe Biden with 94% of the precincts in. How about Nicollet County? North Mankato, 100% in. Another county that President Trump flipped. It had been Obama, then it went to Trump 4 years ago. Now it's back to Biden with 100% in, and he won by 600 votes in that county. These are smaller counties. They don't count as much as Hennepin and Ramsey counties, but they're important because President Trump used these counties. There were 19 pivot counties in Minnesota that went for Obama, and then they went for Trump. And in at least 2 cases in the Mankato area, they have flipped back. Another one would be Beltrami County. That would be Bemidji. No results in there. And then you want to talk about St. Louis County as well. President Trump put a lot of effort into that county. Mike Pence was there. Donald Trump was there in recent weeks. 64% in, so we don't know where all of these 64% are. They could be in Duluth. They could be in the Iron Range. But Joe Biden is leading by 17,000 votes in St. Louis County. Hillary Clinton won that county by only 13,000 votes. So right now, all across the state, greater Minnesota or the 7-county metro, and especially in Hennepin County, where Joe Biden got nearly 100,000 more votes than Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden is doing much better than Clinton did 4 years ago.
Yeah, and you know, Theo, in 2016, Minnesota wasn't called until Wednesday because it was so close. Steve Simon felt confident that because we had absentee ballots counted ahead of time, that there would be a way to project a winner tonight. But now we're seeing some slow returns. Do you think that might be in jeopardy, that we might still be waiting quite some time?
Well, sort of surprising that we haven't had Minnesota called yet because of what I just went through. Greater Minnesota and the 7-county metro doing better. Now, look at 2 counties specifically as to why it hasn't been called. Ramsey County, only 25% of the precincts in. Don't know what the problem is there. Hennepin County, Anoka County, all in. Ramsey County, only 25% in. And then we talk about Dakota County, only 60% in. And in fact, Ramsey County, I had 2 counties highlighted there. Ramsey County is, in fact, only 2% in. So I don't know what the issue there is in Ramsey County. That may be, obviously, it's the 2nd most populous county in the state. That may be why we haven't had Minnesota called yet.
It's probably what's got Steve Simon staring at his computer screen right now as we speak.
Making some phone calls.
All right.
Okay.
Let's take a look at those key states. One of them that just got called was Ohio, with its 18 electoral votes now called for Donald Trump. Just a reminder for our viewers who are into political history, no Republican has ever won the White House without winning Ohio, and there is the electoral map.
So let's bring in Catherine now that Ohio has been called. You know, I know each state has a different story, and I know pollsters will start to look for trends, but with Arizona being flipped, Florida staying the same, do you think that we can really see trends from 2016 for the typical Trump voter?
I mean, so far I'm seeing a lot of continuity in a narrowly divided country with a lot of swing states. And we haven't seen a lot of change. You know, in most elections, 9 out of 10 partisans vote for their party's candidate. That's what we saw 4 years ago. And I suspect that that's what this year's exit polls will tell us this year. And so not a lot of defections. What was interesting about this year is fewer votes for third-party candidates. This election was really a question of what would independents be doing in those key swing states. And with the exception of Arizona, so far no states have changed from 4 years ago in terms of their electoral college choice.
All right, I just want to tell the producers that I'd like to go to Theo Keith because he just got some breaking news in. We referenced Ramsey County here in the metro and why we were getting such a slow return of numbers. And I think, Theo, you've got an answer at least on that front.
Yeah, this comes from colleague Hannah Flood, who reached out to Ramsey County. They said, now again, here's the issue. Only 2% in Ramsey County is in. Neighboring Hennepin County, 100% in. Why is that, Ramsey County? Well, they say they're not having problems. They are just simply still uploading the results. A lot of absentee ballots to go through, a lot of in-person election day ballots to go through. It's just a slow process. They say no major glitches.
Taking their time.
Nice to have an answer.
All right. Thanks, Theo. All right, let's take a look at those key swing states, starting with Minnesota. Again, Minnesota has stayed in Joe Biden's corner for quite some time since we started looking at the votes, and it really hasn't moved much, 55 to 43%.
And we probably won't expect to hear a projected winner for Wisconsin tonight with 10 electoral votes. And Catherine, feel free to jump in anytime as we go through these swing states tonight. But right now, President Trump is leading in Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin, Catherine, and Theo mentioned this too, should Wisconsinites who are watching this tonight, and we have quite a few viewers in that western part of Wisconsin, should we be wondering about Green Bay and Milwaukee before we put too much emphasis on these numbers in Wisconsin?
Yes, I think so, because we know that Milwaukee won't be finished counting their votes until sometime tomorrow. And so I think this is one of these, we just need to wait until every ballot is counted.
All right, let's move to Michigan with its 16 electoral votes. You saw it earlier. There it is right there. Donald Trump, 44%, or 54%. Joe Biden with 44%. That race was called just a short time ago.
All right, and then in Ohio, 18 electoral votes. This race called for Donald Trump, the projected winner in Ohio with its 18 electoral votes.
Yeah, let me back up there because Michigan has not been called. That was Ohio, to your credit. Michigan not called yet, but it's a very close race in Michigan. It is in Donald Trump's corner right now, but it has not been called.
And Pennsylvania, they've already said there that it could be several days before we have results and a projected winner, but the president is leading in Pennsylvania with the number of votes that have been tallied so far.
Florida has been called with its 29 electoral votes going to Donald Trump. He won that state 51% to 48%, and you're seeing it right there.
Arizona has been called as well. Joe Biden, the projected winner in Arizona with 11 electoral votes.
I think we should watch Texas very closely. That's a state that has not been called yet. Probably leaning toward a call soon, 52% to 47% in Donald Trump's corner right now, with 76% of those precincts reporting in the state of Texas.
In the weeks leading up to this election, Georgia was considered too close to call. And right now, with its 16 electoral votes, it has not been called. Donald Trump is leading in Georgia right now.
How about our neighbors to the south there in Iowa with 6 electoral votes right now? Donald Trump, he spent a lot of time in Iowa. So did Joe Biden trying to win that state. Even though it's only 6 electoral votes, it's a good bellwether state. And right now, Donald Trump winning in the state of Iowa.
All right, let's take a look at North Carolina and trying to figure out North Carolina right now. Very close race there, 15 electoral votes. And this is a state that went for Donald Trump in 2016. And right now, the president is leading in North Carolina. So, Catherine, they had about maybe 80% of registered voters voting early, and they had that huge number that they could report as soon as the polls closed tonight. So what are you seeing in North Carolina across the state?
I mean, I think we're seeing just a close state, and they want to make sure that every vote is counted before they call it, or at least enough votes are counted that it would be impossible for the candidate who's behind to overtake the winner. I think really ever since 2000, with these very close races, there's just a lot of caution before calling them.
This is one that Donald Trump, his path would require North Carolina, so we'll watch that one very closely. Virginia was called almost 2 hours ago for Joe Biden with its 13 electoral votes.
And then Nevada, a state that did go for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And right now, we really don't have a lot of numbers coming out of Nevada. It's 1% of precincts reporting at this point. So we'll continue to watch Nevada.
Here's some Senate races, key U.S. Senate races you should watch, folks, tonight, because some of these are going to make a big difference in the balance of power. Starting in Michigan, Gary Peters, the Democrat, and John James, the Republican. Right now, that one is in John James, the Republican's hands, with 55% of the vote.
Of course, Iowa again, a critical swing state, very competitive. Joni Ernst, the incumbent, The Republican is leading in this race so far.
South Carolina, Lindsey Graham seeking his 4th term right there, the Republican. He has been declared the winner in the state of South Carolina.
And here's another race with a projected winner, Mark Kelly in Arizona, running against Martha McSally. And of course, Arizona also went for Joe Biden, flipping that state from red to blue.
In the state of Maine, Susan Collins, the Republican, she was challenged by Sarah Gideon. Susan Collins hanging on to her seat right now with 52% of the vote.
Colorado, you have this race has been called for John Hickenlooper, the Democrat, running against Cory Gardner.
I want to ask you about this one, Catherine, because you mentioned to me earlier in the night that Cory Gardner was not really into this race. What did you mean by that?
He really wasn't. He honestly didn't campaign very hard, and whenever President Trump would say something, reporters couldn't find him. He didn't campaign that hard, and he almost seemed resigned to the fact that a popular governor was going to beat him. And so he is one of 2 seats that Democrats have picked up, but then Republicans have also picked up a seat. So Republicans started the night with 53, gained 1 and then lost 2. So Republicans still are holding on to the majority, but there are several close races that have not been called.
Yeah, very tight, by the way. Huh? Thank you.
And in North Carolina, this Senate race kind of mirroring what's happening in the presidential race, just incredibly close right now. Tom Tillis, the Republican incumbent, facing Democrat Cal Cunningham. An interesting race here as well, too, because, Catherine, in the weeks leading up to this election, Cal Cunningham had kind of a personal scandal, but it didn't really affect him in the polls.
It didn't seem to affect him in the polls, much to everyone's surprise. But at the end of the day, it's possible it affected him on election night. I guess we'll look to we'll exit polls later to dive into this race.
Let's take a look at Georgia. David Perdue, the Republican, and John Ossoff, the Democrat. This is a state, by the way, the Democrats have not won a Senate or a presidential race in 20 years. Why is it so hard, Catherine, for a Democrat to win in Georgia in the U.S. Senate?
Well, it's a great question because, of course, Georgia used to be solidly Democratic. Both conservatives and liberals were Democrats in Georgia, and that all changed beginning in the 1960s, 70s, and Georgia became a 2-party system by the 1980s. And so now Republicans tend to do better statewide, even as Democrats are picking up support in recent elections.
All right, let's look at Alabama. You had Doug Jones, the Democratic incumbent in a very red state, and he was running against former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville, and this race has been called for Tuberville.
In Montana, Stephen Daines and Steve Bullock. Steve was the 2-time governor there. Steve Bullock was. Surprisingly competitive race, and it's still very close. Stephen Daines losing to Steve Bullock. Again, he's a former governor, Bullock is, 51 to 49%.
In Kansas. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
I was going to say Steve Bullock is a popular Democratic governor in a red state. So he's someone who's very moderate and won re-election twice, once in 2016 when Trump...
All right, we have a win in the state of Texas. It's been called for Donald Trump with its 38 electoral votes. This is the one that we were watching closely in the last 15 minutes or so. And again, called for Donald Trump with those 38 electoral votes.
And I think it was anticipated that it would go to Donald Trump. But, Catherine, the fact that it was so much closer in Texas than it had been before, what sort of trends did you see in Texas?
Well, I saw demographic change in Texas helping Democrats, but not helping Democrats enough to turn the state blue. With younger voters turning out at higher rates, we know that Texas early votes actually eclipsed all voter turnout in 2016.
And as we look at that again, Texas going to Donald Trump, 38 electoral votes. That was definitely on the win column, at least the projected win column for Donald Trump as he campaigned around the country. Expected to get Texas, but there were a lot of political analysts that watched that and said it's going to be closer than most people think. And as we look at that Kentucky race there, Mitch McConnell, the winner there in Kentucky, no surprises there, 58% to 38%.
All right, let's go to the electoral map right now, take a look at the big picture. If we can, adding Texas now to the electoral map so we can get a total of electoral votes, and it's coming here in just a second. So now that puts Joe Biden with 223 electoral votes, the president with 204, both trying to get to 270.
All right, let's take a look at how everything is shaping up, beginning with that national race, and take a look at how those electoral votes are shaping up. Going to the national numbers for electoral votes, Joe Biden with 223, Donald Trump with 204. This race is tightening. There is a path for both candidates.
But we will be waiting a while on some of those big swing states. All right, popular vote. Joe Biden leading right now in the popular vote.
And U.S. President race in Minnesota here, also in the popular vote. Joe Biden has had a 10-point lead. He continues to hold that 10-point lead as you see the number of precincts increasing reporting in.
And in Wisconsin, where the governor had already said earlier this week that it would be Wednesday before they would likely be able to project a winner. But right now, the president is leading in Wisconsin.
All right, let's take a Minnesota's U.S. Senate race. Tina Smith, the incumbent, Jason Lewis, the Republican challenger. This race has not moved much throughout the night. Jason Lewis, 42%, and Tina Smith with 50%.
Really competitive congressional district in the southern part of Minnesota, the 1st congressional district. This is a rematch from 2 years ago, Jim Hagedorn and Dan Feehan, and right now Jim Hagedorn is leading in this race.
District 2, Angie Craig, Tyler Kistner, her Republican challenger. Folks, this is one that will be on for quite some time. You can see it's tightening as those votes come in, 47% to 47%. Again, that's in District 2.
And a lot of national money pouring into the 7th congressional district in the western part of the state. That's where Colin Peterson, longtime DFL candidate in a very red district, being challenged by Michelle Fischbach, and she is leading in this race.
District 8, Pete Stauber, the Republican, Quinn Nystrom, the challenger. She's a newcomer to politics, but she's held in there pretty well tonight. Right now, Pete Stauber, though, winning. He's winning by 9 percentage points with 50% of the precincts reporting in. Keep in mind, again, folks, the precincts reporting in is less relevant this election than any other election because of so many mail-in votes and so many absentee votes that still have to be counted.
Yeah, it may be too hard to really tell what's going on in some of these congressional districts right now because it just may be too early. We want to bring in Theo Keith again. And, one of the difficult things about reporting the numbers tonight is that we don't know which number was tossed out there first. They could count absentee ballots ahead of time. So did some precincts or districts put that number out there first? Are they putting out day of numbers? We just don't know.
Yeah, that's why I've been continually saying we want to look at counties that have 100% in.
Right.
And so many of the counties now have 100% in, but take in Dakota County. Dakota County saying they only have about 60% in. Dakota County saying their vote results include polling place results and some absentee ballot results, but not all absentee ballots are included in the count. So that's a little swung toward people who voted today and not all the people who voted over the past 46 days. That's why it's important to wait until you get 100% of a particular county before you're able to compare this year that county compared to 4 years ago that county.
It's also a fairly clear explanation as to why some states, for example, Pennsylvania, we just won't know for quite some time. At least they're not going to throw that out there with so many of those votes in this historic election being mailed in, absentee ballots, and they're not even going to start that process. And they're also going to accept votes after Election Day in Pennsylvania.
That's true. So perhaps we should do a reset at this point and talk about these 3 states that are going to be so critical, because you've now seen, if we can go to the map, Texas and Florida called for President Trump. That narrows down Joe Biden's pathway to 270, and it very much includes Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The 3 states that have very restrictive laws on when they can start counting absentee ballots. In Wisconsin and Pennsylvania's case, it was not until today. In Wisconsin, Milwaukee County's election officials say they will not have results until 4 or 5 in the morning, so we will not see Wisconsin called in all likelihood until tomorrow sometime. Michigan and Pennsylvania, it may take until Thursday or Friday. And you mentioned Pennsylvania, there's uncertainty. They, like Minnesota, are accepting absentee ballots after today, but like Minnesota, they are going to be setting them aside in case there's a legal challenge to them. In Pennsylvania's case, they're not even going to count them. They're setting them aside in case they're later allowed to count. So that's legal limbo. There's going to be potentially tens of thousands, if not maybe 100,000 ballots that come in over the next 3 days in Pennsylvania. They have a 3-day grace period. We have had a 7-day grace period. So you talk about that, it may not be till Wednesday, Thursday, potentially even Friday until we know results. And then we talk about going to court.
Right.
Still not a good enough reason for the folks out there to go to bed yet, though, because we still will have quite a few results coming in. We will know some of these races, especially some of these state races and these congressional races. We're pretty confident we'll get a handle on those tonight yet.
And all of this tells a very interesting story. We have Rob Olson at GOP headquarters right now. Just tell us what's going on there. I know this is a very unconventional way to celebrate any kind of election because you can't gather in the way that we traditionally do.
Yeah, it certainly looks different in here than a typical election night at the GOP party headquarters because they had to limit the crowd size to several hundred rather than usually by this time of night. This would be a very, very crowded ballroom and difficult to navigate your way through. Now you can see behind me that it's not that way, and that's simply because of the limited attendance to this matter. I will say, though, as the night has gone on, and no one's left, you can feel the enthusiasm in this room as they see these returns come in and states be called for President Trump. And so there's a lot of that excitement and that energy that is building here. And we'll say this, too. This is, because of restrictions, COVID restrictions or precautions or the rules here, not only limiting the number of people here, but they required masks to be worn by everybody. And they all were at the beginning of the night, took them off to eat dinner and to have drinks. And after that, very few have gone back on, so kind of loosening up there on those precautions through the night. But again, that enthusiasm continuing to build, and nobody leaving here as they watch us, knowing that it could be a late night, seeing some of these come in with some of the states that still have to do hand counting of ballots before the returns will have any more significant gains in them. But again, here, even though it's a non-traditional night, there's still that sort of energy in the room that you get on a traditional election night in the party headquarters in a ballroom here in Bloomington, where they've held this for many, many election nights that I've been here for this. So again, this crowd does not look to be going anywhere anytime soon. In it here for the long haul to see as these returns kind of slowly come in and they watch the counters towards 270 to see which way it will land. Back to you.
All right, Rob Olson at GOP headquarters. Thank you.
Speaking of returns coming in, 4 electoral votes in the state of Hawaii. Those are going to Joe Biden. No surprise here. That was expected it would go that way, but it does tally up for Joe Biden as he moves closer to 270, and we'll watch that. There's the big electoral map that we're showing you, and Hawaii is down there in the bottom there on the left side, turning blue for you.
All right, let's go back to Catherine again now. Take a look at the map. So we have more filled in here at this point, but the electoral votes stand at 227 to 204. So, Catherine, I'm sure both campaign is looking at a path right now. What are those paths?
Well, the path for Trump's campaign is to pretty much maintain all of the states he did in 2016, minus Arizona, which he's already lost, and then he can lose. He could lose Pennsylvania, but then he would still need Wisconsin and Michigan, or lose Wisconsin or Michigan. So he can lose one of those three.
Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden, he's following a path that could have been predicted before tonight. There hasn't been any big surprises. The only one I would put in a slight surprise, of course, would be Arizona. Is that fair?
That's fair, with the caveat that many of the competitive states, the swing states that Trump won, were actually, Biden had a slight lead in the polls. And so many of the polls were within the margin of error. But I think that just as we were asking in 2016 what happened with some of these polls, some of those same stories will come out after 2020 with some of the polls that had him with a narrow lead in some of these competitive states that Trump won 4 years ago.
I think we should take a minute to explain to Nebraska and Maine and how they split their electoral votes, because that could come into play tonight.
That's right. That's right. So 48 of the 50 states for the Electoral College, it's winner take all, even with the narrowest margins. But for Maine and Nebraska, two of their Electoral College votes go to the state winner, and then the other votes are for their congressional districts. So Nebraska has 2 congressional districts, and so it's possible that one of their votes could go the other way. And in fact, Nebraska's 1st congressional district's Electoral College vote is still too close to
Catherine,
call.
how do they get away with that? Why is it not consistent with the rest of the country? How is it why couldn't Minnesota do the same thing?
Minnesota could do the same thing.
Okay.
Yes. The Electoral College is in the Constitution, but not the specific ways in which the states allocate their votes.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to you in just a minute, Catherine. We want to go to Tom Lydon.
Tom is at DFL headquarters, as he's been all night long for us, bringing us perspective from the DFLers down there. And Tom, has there been an uptick in energy at the DFL yet?
No, it was really funny to see Rob Olson over at the GOP headquarters. You know, he had a crowd, he had energy. We have no crowd, no energy. Actually, what we have is a room full of reporters who are staring at the same computer screen of results that I was just looking at a few minutes ago. You know, this is almost like a kind of political cake, if you would allow me to kind of use probably what's going to be a bad metaphor. You know, for Democrats, the icing might look pretty good in Minnesota, right? Looks like Joe Biden's going to carry Minnesota by a much bigger margin than even Hillary Clinton did. It looks like Senator Tina Smith may win. I mean, there's a lot of counting still to be done, but these things look hopeful. And we have Dean Phillips, Ilhan Omar, and Betty McCollum holding on to their congressional seats. But you dig into the cake, and then all of a sudden you realize, well, Dan Feehan may not beat Jim Hagedorn. Angie Craig may not keep her seat. Colin Peterson, after 30 years, might not keep his. Again, the results still need to come in, but right now it is not looking fantastic. And I will tell you, remember just a few weeks ago, now talking about the national picture, a few weeks ago we were seeing headlines talking about a Democratic landslide. I got to tell you, it does not look like a landslide tonight, and the mood is very subdued. But as Ken Martin said, you know, this isn't going to be decided tonight. We're still going to count up these votes. And we obviously have some delays like Ramsey County, that's significant. And we also have these segregated ballots. And what happens with those if we have some really close races and we have that 8th Circuit decision? I said it at the beginning of the evening, and I think it is still true. If you were looking tonight to see the season finale, you didn't get the season finale, you got the season cliffhanger. And that's really where we stand here at 11 o'clock tonight. Guys?
All right, if you're just joining us, it means you worked until 11 o'clock tonight. It's 11:08. Want to bring you up to speed. You're watching Fox 9's coverage of You Decide 2020. Let's begin with the biggest numbers of the night tonight. Of course, that's the electoral vote, the race to 270 right now as it stands, as those candidates continue to pick off states across the country. Joe Biden with 227 electoral votes and Donald Trump with 204.
And the popular vote right now, Joe Biden is leading in the popular vote.
In the same case in Minnesota in the popular vote, Joe Biden leading handily 54% to 44%.
Wisconsin probably won't get a projected winner until tomorrow at the earliest, but right now Donald Trump is leading in Wisconsin.
And you heard Tom Lydon mention that U.S. Senate seat here in Minnesota. Tina Smith continuing to maintain a lead over Jason Lewis, although it is getting a little bit tighter. Only 8 percentage points now. At one point it was 12 to 13% separating the two. In the 1st congressional district in the southern part of the state, a very competitive district that Jim Hagedorn narrowly won 2 years ago when he ran against Dan Feehan. Right now he's leading in this race. In the 2nd congressional district, the incumbent Angie Craig being challenged handily by the Republican Tyler Kistner. That has maintained a 47 to 47 for the last 20 minutes or so now, watching that one very closely in District 2. And the 7th congressional district, you heard Tom talk about this. Colin Peterson's been in Washington for 29 years, and he has held on to this seat for all of that time, but his district has changed, and Michelle Fischbach, the Republican challenger, is leading tonight. In the 8th district, that's one that does have a tendency to flip now and then. Right now, Pete Stauber, the Republican, is holding on to his seat, the incumbent, 53% to 42% over Quinn Nystrom. All right, I'm going to bring Theo Keith again as we take a look at some of the races and some of the states that have been called. And, you know, as you look at, the state of Minnesota, and we're still waiting for that, to get a projected winner in Minnesota. But we look at all of these congressional races and some changes that are, on the horizon. Yeah, the congressional races are really interesting. So that 7th district race between Michelle Fischbach and Colin Peterson with, 60% in, looks like he's on the way out. Of course, that race hasn't been called yet. We have to watch. But that would be a significant victory for Republicans who have wanted that seat for a long period of time. And she was handpicked by national Republicans to run against him, right? In fact, they were very happy when she won the primary. She faced the guy who went up against Colin Peterson 4 years ago and 2 years ago and lost. They wanted Fischbach. They got that out of the primary. And now she's ahead by 12 percentage points. We'll have to keep watching. They're also very interested in that 2nd congressional district race, the Tyler Kistner race. This was, from national observers, people who rate these races, expected to be a lean Angie Craig race.
She was expected to win, although narrowly. This race is on Election Day instead of in February. Tyler Kistner wanted it in February because Republicans typically do better in special elections. Well, Tyler Kistner is holding his own quite well tonight. And then in the 1st Congressional District, again, that was considered to be a toss-up, $16 million spent. Jim Hagedorn won that particular district by 1,300 votes 2 years ago. And, it's going to be an awfully close one again.
Let's talk about that 2nd Congressional District again. It's so interesting. 4 years ago, Jason Lewis won that race. He ran against Angie Craig, and then she beat him 2 years ago. And 4 years ago, people split their ticket in that district, because I went and I looked sort of precinct by precinct, and there were people that, the state went for Hillary Clinton, but they would, if they voted for her, they would vote for him in that congressional seat. So it's just a very competitive district, and it's gone back and forth. And so,
and that was some of what Republicans were hoping for again tonight, that even if President Trump did poorly in the suburbs, and is he doing poorly in the suburbs, underperforming what he did even 4 years ago, that people would split their tickets. They would maybe vote for Joe Biden, but then they would vote for the Republican congressional candidate or the Republican state legislative candidate. And in Kistner's case, that seems to be happening. Now, again, not all the votes are in, but he's holding his own there.
Right. Well, and then you add in the potential legal challenge because this third-party candidate passed away in September, and then there was a period of time where we weren't sure it was going to be on the ballot. And so
even when this race, if it gets called tonight or tomorrow, there's still going to be legal issues to sort out in that 2nd district.
Well, you sit tight because we know you have a handle on these Minnesota State Senate races, and again, that's one that needs to be watched very closely. Let's go to the Minnesota Senate District 44, Plymouth and Minnetonka. Take a look at how those are shaping up for our viewers. Now, this is was considered a very vulnerable seat. Let's see how it's doing right now as we look at that one. Greg Pullis, the Republican, and Ann Johnson Stewart, the Democrat. Right now, the Democrat winning 59% to 41%, with quite a few precincts reporting it says 100%, but again, keep in mind, folks, other votes have to be counted.
And in Savage, Burnsville, District 56, Dan Hall, the Republican, facing Lindsey Port, the DFL candidate. Right now, Dan Hall is leading in that race.
Lakeville, Farmington, District 58, Matt Little, the DFLer, and Zach Duckworth, the Republican. Zach Duckworth winning in that race right now, 56% to 44%.
Northern Rochester, District 25, and you have Dave Senjum, the Republican, facing Sarah Flick, the DFL candidate. Right now, it is incredibly close, so we'll continue to watch District 25.
These are the ones that Theo referenced that could make a difference in the overall outcome of who has power in the Minnesota Senate. District 27, Albert Lee and Austin down I-35, Dan Sparks, the DFLer, Gene Dornick, the Republican. Right now, the Republican leading by 10 percentage points.
And in District 34 in Maple Grove, you have Warren Limmer, the Republican, facing Bonnie Westland, the DFL candidate. And right now, Limmer is leading in this race.
District 38, for folks that don't know, that's White Bear Lake and Hugo, Lino Lakes. Roger Chamberlain, the Republican, versus Justin Stofferon, the DFLer. Right now, Chamberlain winning by 10 percentage points.
And in District 39, the Washington County Stillwater area, we were waiting for some numbers to come in. Now we have some numbers. Karn Housley, the incumbent, is leading in this race.
I'd like to bring Theo in. Theo, you've been watching this very closely. As I pointed out before, it's because of such a tight situation in the Minnesota Senate race. They had a 3-seat margin coming into tonight. There are some changes going on here. Hold that thought for a second. Let's take a look at the electoral map, and right now we have a projected winner.
And Iowa is going for President Trump with its 6 electoral votes. This was considered too close to call going into Election Day. It was a tight race, but already at 11:15 tonight, Iowa has been called, and that's 6 more electoral votes for the president.
There it is, 227 now to 204. Let's see if it changes.
There's
Joe
210.
Biden. Should be 210, yes. It's right now 227 to 210. There it is, right there, shifting on the right side of your screen down there, 210 to 227. We also have a break here for Minnesota with its 10 electoral votes now called for Joe Biden. Enough votes have been cast that they can call that, and the 10 electoral votes. Joe Biden, and this does not come as a surprise as we've watched these numbers throughout the evening.
Yeah, and Theo's at the map right now, so we might want to go to Theo first here. We were waiting for some of those districts to report before Minnesota would be called, and it looks like some numbers came in, Theo.
Well, 55% of Minnesota's voters are in the 7-county metro. We've been talking about this all night. Donald Trump has underperformed in the 7-county metro. That means Joe Biden has overperformed. Hennepin County specifically, would have been hard for Donald Trump to overcome this margin alone. Joe Biden getting 100,000 votes, nearly more than Hillary Clinton did 4 years ago. That would be, in and of itself, very difficult for Donald Trump to do. And then when you factor in he didn't do as well in Anoka County as he did 4 years ago. He won that county by only 4,000 votes tonight, won by 18,000 4 years ago. Carver County, same thing. 8,000 votes 4 years ago, only 3,000 votes he won by this year. And that really took place all around the 7-county metro. And that is why we were speculating a little while ago why Minnesota hasn't been called yet. Well, now it has for Joe Biden. That's why.
And Catherine, you and I talked earlier tonight about this path for Joe Biden. And I think it shaped up fairly quickly here in Minnesota. He never lost the lead. Donald Trump never even came close to him throughout the evening.
That's right. And after 4 years ago, with Hillary Clinton only winning by 1.5 percentage points, and both candidates' campaigns taking Minnesota much more seriously in 2016 or in 2020, it had the potential to be closer. It was sort of a second-tier swing state throughout the campaign. But as Theo explained, it's less close this year because of the large turnout in the metro area.
Let's talk about Iowa now. 6 electoral votes that go to the president, but it was closer in Iowa this time around.
Theo?
Yeah, so in Iowa specifically, you had President Trump, who won 4 years ago. The race was considered a lean Trump state, and sure enough, it's been called tonight for President Trump. Can I talk specifically about Minnesota again and its impacts in the broader Midwest? Because as we've mentioned now, Joe Biden did better than Hillary Clinton did statewide, even in some counties that President Trump won that had been longtime Democratic counties, including Blue Earth County, Nicollet County, down in the Mankato region. You know why this is important? Joe Biden doing better than expected in Minnesota. Well, who's paying attention to this? But it's going to be Wisconsin. The two states are pretty similar voting-wise, and you saw in 2016 Minnesota go for Hillary Clinton by 1.5 points. You saw Wisconsin go for Donald Trump by 1 point. That's a razor-thin margin on both sides. The states typically vote politically together, and you had Minnesota likely going much more for Joe Biden than the 1.5 points it went for Hillary Clinton. What does that do for Wisconsin? Well, that likely means that Joe Biden gets more votes in Wisconsin. He would only need 23,000 more votes than Hillary Clinton in order to win Wisconsin. Wisconsin hasn't been called yet, might not be called until tomorrow morning, but that's how these two states play together.
Yeah. All right, Theo, thank you.
All right, let's go to Tom Lydon at DFL headquarters. Tom, you mentioned the mood being a little bit somber. Has that changed now with Minnesota being called?
It's a little better. There was a scattering of applause. Party chair, DFL party chair Ken Martin just got to the podium and he said, congratulations, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They have been declared the winner in Minnesota. But he said, we are not going to count any more or declare any more races tonight. They're actually calling it quits here and wrapping it up. He said, we're going to be patient. Every vote, every person's going to be counted. We're going to wake up tomorrow, DFLers, and we're going to do it again. Like he said at the beginning, this is probably going to be a protracted multi-day event, maybe even weeks, depending on this 8th Circuit decision and who takes up that cause. There was just really only a scattering of applause, I will tell you. Obviously, this has been a very unique election season. I don't think I've seen anything quite like this, but it's a very odd feeling when you have the DFL party chair gets up with what's supposed to be the major announcement of the day, and yet there is sort of this pall over it. And you sense that, not all the news is good. We have DFLers have 3 congressional seats they have held on to, but they have 2 they may lose, another they thought they would pick up that they may not. So a lot of votes still need to be counted, and a lot is still in flux, including control of the Minnesota Senate. So we'll see in the days to come. As Ken Martin said, the DFL will be back at it tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tom.
Let's bring Catherine back in to talk about how these electoral votes are shaping up. We can put that up for our viewers. And Catherine, I want you to weigh in on that now, too. Again, Iowa just going to Donald Trump. Joe Biden getting Minnesota. Again, neither one of these create much of a surprise for the paths that have been laid out through much of the evening.
Well, that's right. And assuming that Arizona is one of the only states that changes, Biden would need then to win Pennsylvania plus either Michigan or Wisconsin, or Michigan, Wisconsin, and then both of Nebraska's first and Maine's congressional districts electoral college vote. So the paths are relatively narrow. Now, of course, North Carolina and Georgia still haven't been called, but I think, Biden's best path right now is either Pennsylvania plus Michigan or Wisconsin, or Michigan, Wisconsin, and one of the Nebraska's congressional district vote and Maine's congressional district vote.
Boy, the Midwest is coming in very important, as it did in 2016.
Yes.
Yeah, it is so close right now. Catherine, in recent memory, can you remember a presidential election that was this close at this stage of the game?
Well, certainly 4 years ago, and then, of course, 2000. 2000 was, the election that of course, that was when the networks were a little less hesitant to call states. So Florida was called, then taken back, and then, of course, the drama that ensued. But this is clearly a very close election with just so many close swing states still, with votes still being counted and likely being counted for the next few days.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. Let's take a look at how things are shaping up in a national picture with the numbers again for our viewers who may just be joining us at 11:22. Electoral votes, U.S. President Joe Biden coming in with 237 at this point. Donald Trump with 210. Again, those paths are narrowing for both candidates, but there is a picture forming in this.
The popular vote now. Of the votes that have been counted, Joe Biden is leading in the popular vote.
Yeah, and U.S. President popular vote for Minnesota. We've already called Minnesota for Joe Biden, 53% to 45%. Again, that is a state called for Joe Biden in Minnesota.
Wisconsin won't be known until tomorrow at the earliest, according to the Secretary of State's office and the governor. Right now, the president is leading, though, in Wisconsin.
And in the U.S. Senate race here in Minnesota, Tina Smith, the incumbent Democrat, Jason Lewis. This one is tightening, folks. It's been going, it was going in Tina Smith's favor for most of the night by as many as 12 percentage points. It's now down to 7 percentage points. Still quite a few votes to be counted yet in that race.
And the first congressional district in the southern part of the state. This is a rematch from 2 years ago. Jim Hagedorn, the incumbent, is leading right now, but it is a close race and a competitive district.
And in U.S. House District 2, Tyler Kistner and Angie Craig. This one has maintained a tie now for the last half hour, maybe more. As those votes continue to roll in, this is a race very, very close.
And in the 7th congressional district, Michelle Fischbach has been leading most of the night with the votes that have come in. Colin Peterson, a longtime congressman, this has been his district for the last 30 years, but he's a DFL candidate in a very red district, and this is one that the GOP thought that they could pick up, and it hasn't been called yet, but she is leading.
All right, U.S. House District 8 up there, Pete Stauber, the Republican, Quinn Nystrom, the challenger, the first-time political candidate, Quinn Nystrom. Right now, Pete Stauber with a lead over Quinn Nystrom, 54% to 41%.
All right, in about 6 minutes, we are told that Joe Biden will be speaking. He'll be addressing a crowd, and we will certainly carry that live. So right now, of course, nobody's close to 270 at this point, 237 to 213 electoral votes, but we are told that Joe Biden will speak at 11:30.
And Theo, typically this is a sort of a rah-rah speech Joe Biden would give, certainly not any indication of where this race is going, but they're kind of rally the troops and say, we're still in this thing, we love what we see.
Yeah, and that's important for him because, simply put, he has not done what he wanted to do at the beginning of the night, which was to get an early win on the board, and that would have been Florida, which is already gone for President Trump, Georgia, and North Carolina. The president leads in both of those states, although they haven't been called yet. He has won, Fox News has projected, in Arizona. That's a pickup for him, and that one congressional district in Nebraska as well. So those are going to be his two pickups at this point, very important, but he needs to rally the troops tonight and say, hey, we got a long ways to go.
Likely to do that again for our viewers in about 4 minutes or so. We will see Joe Biden take to a microphone again and speak to the country. A lot of voters standing by, watching to see what's going to happen as we give you the latest numbers there. 237 for Joe Biden, 213 for Donald Trump. Again, it's 270 270 electoral votes is what it takes for these candidates to win the presidency.
All right, I want to bring in Catherine Pearson again. And, you know, we're not hearing from a lot of the candidates tonight, I think simply because of the pandemic. Some of them said that they would address crowds via Facebook or some other online platform. But that's the one thing we're kind of missing with tonight's election coverage.
That's right. There aren't the big election parties that we typically see, whether or not the candidate is won, with the big addresses, with the supporters and the campaign staff. It does feel different this time around.
And also, Minnesota, you know, Tom Lydon, we've gone to him 3 or 4 times tonight, DFL headquarters, and I guess, you know, the thought there was that this is an election that's going to carry itself out for several days. Why be here? Why have this energy? But I wonder, Catherine, if there's more going on here. Is it COVID? I mean, they set up a fairly stringent routine there for only having a handful of people there. Is it COVID or is it what's happening tonight? I guess we don't really know. Your take?
I mean, I think it's probably some combination of both. I think Democrats were hoping to win early in the evening with perhaps Florida or Georgia or North Carolina. Recent polls suggested that was not a given, but it was possible. And then, of course, it seems that it's more difficult than Democrats perhaps thought to take majority party control of the U.S. Senate. You know, so many close races out there and, you know, seemingly many of them breaking in Republicans' direction. But I think throughout the campaign, the two parties have campaigned differently. But yet somehow we still managed to double the amount of spending on the presidential and congressional races from around $7 billion to $14 billion in this election cycle. So the campaigns on both sides are still spending a lot of money. They're just doing things differently.
And the longer this is drawn out, the more it sets the stage for legal challenges. And we've had, because of the pandemic, it has been a complicated election. We've had absentee ballots. Then we've had these questions about when are they counted? When do they need to be in certain states? So I think there's a lot of gray area that is potentially going to start to surface in the next couple of days.
I think absolutely. And of course, the Constitution stipulates that states make their own election laws. And so we're seeing the results of a patchwork of a lot of different laws in this election cycle. And I think it's likely that, you know, many states will rethink how they've done things after this election. And of course, many states change things because of the pandemic, leading to so many challenges.
And as we wait for Joe Biden, his campaign has announced he will speak at about 11:30. In the meantime, Theo Keith, give us your take on how this map is shaping up. And we touched on something, Kelsey touched on something I think that a lot of people anecdotally, as I talk to them outside, say they really didn't expect this race to come to a conclusion tonight. It's really shaping up that way.
That's right, shaping up to be not tonight. So you talked about the gray areas earlier, where I've got some gray areas. Let's play this race out and see how it would shake out, as if all the results that are in right now would hold by the end of tonight or whenever the results are final. That would mean President Trump wins in Georgia and North Carolina, where he is ahead. We'll give him Alaska, that's a solid Republican state. Joe Biden will give him Nevada. Hillary Clinton won there. And then you come to the point where we're right here, pretty much a tie. Nobody has gotten to 270 electoral votes. And which 3 states are still out? Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. In order to get to 270, one candidate would have to win both of those. If Trump wins these 2 states, that gets him over 270. If Biden wins the 2 states, that gets him to 270. Pennsylvania would be icing on the cake at that point. But if either of the candidates wins 2 out of 3 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, that would give them the election if all the other results are holding that we see right now in the online vote count.
That focuses it very well right there.
Right.
Yeah, and likely the way it could go if things continue along the route they're on right now, at least until we get to those 3 states that you talk about.
And because those are the 3 states that didn't start counting the absentee ballots until today, we knew that we would be waiting on them. I think a lot of people suspected we would be waiting on those 3 states for a decision in this presidential election.
While we wait for Joe Biden to come to the microphone, we're told that will happen somewhere around 11:30. It's now almost 11:31. But in the meantime, let's take a look at how those national races are shaping up. Back to the electoral votes and how they've tallied thus far. With the states that have been called, Joe Biden at 237, Donald Trump at 213.
Let's take a look at the popular vote again. This is where things stand at the moment in our country. Joe Biden is leading in the popular vote, still very close, and we have a lot of states and numbers that still need to come in.
We know where Minnesota fell in the popular vote. Joe Biden pretty much walked away here in Minnesota, 53% to 45%. He is the projected winner in the state of Minnesota.
And Wisconsin won't expect to have a projected winner until tomorrow at the earliest, but Donald Trump is leading in Wisconsin right now.
Another race to watch tonight, that U.S. Senate race here in Minnesota. The incumbent Tina Smith, the Democrat, being challenged by Jason Lewis. This one is tightened to a 7 percentage point difference between the two.
And in the 1st congressional district in the southern part of the state, a lot of big congressional seats with a lot of money spent nationally on these races in Minnesota. Jim Hagedorn, the incumbent, is leading right now over Dan Feehan.
How about District 2? This one is really tight, folks. Tyler Kistner, the challenger, the Republican, against Angie Craig, the incumbent. This one has been at 47% for both candidates now for the better part of an hour. Too close to call.
The 7th congressional district in the western part of the state, the incumbent Colin Peterson was considered vulnerable because his district has really changed to more of a red district. Michelle Fischbach coming in, and she has a pretty sizable lead at this point, but this race has not been called yet.
All right, let's take a look at that 8th district, Minnesota up north there. Pete Stauber, the Republican, Quinn Nystrom. Pete Stauber has been winning this race for most of the night. And right now, he is still winning it, moving that lead to a margin of 15 percentage points.
All right, let's take a look at some of the big swing states. Minnesota has been called for Joe Biden tonight.
And Wisconsin, we're waiting on Wisconsin, also with 10 electoral votes. Right now, Donald Trump winning in Wisconsin, leading in Wisconsin 52% to 47%. But again, Wisconsin could very well be one of those states that takes quite some time to have an official tally.
I know people were still in line waiting to vote in Michigan when the polls closed there, and they started counting their absentee ballots just yesterday. But the president is leading in Michigan right now. 16 electoral votes, and we probably won't see a projected winner in Michigan for quite some time.
In Ohio, this one was called for Donald Trump about an hour ago, 53% to 45%. Donald Trump taking the state of Ohio, and it's 18 electoral votes.
Also, Pennsylvania, by some estimates wouldn't have a projected winner until the end of the week. 20 electoral votes, and right now the president is leading in Pennsylvania.
1 hour ago, Donald Trump, the projected winner in the state of Florida, with 29 electoral votes, right there, 51% to 48%. Tighter than many thought, but both candidates spent a lot of time there. Both candidates wanted it bad.
Arizona, a state that Joe Biden was able to flip. And he is the projected winner in Arizona tonight with 11 electoral votes.
In the state of Texas, Donald Trump taking the state of Texas, 52% to 46%. Donald Trump, the winner in the state of Texas. This one was called, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm
yes.
Right about
We
that.
just don't have the check mark there.
All right.
And Georgia, 16 electoral votes, too close to call at this point, but you can see with the votes that have been counted, the president is leading in Georgia.
And reference just a short time ago, Iowa with its 6 electoral votes called for Donald Trump, 53% to 45%.
And North Carolina, another state too close to call, very close there tonight. The president has a slight lead with the numbers that have been counted so far.
And in Virginia, this one went early to Joe Biden, I think shortly after 8 o'clock. This was called for Joe Biden, 52% to 46%.
And numbers have been a little bit slow to come in from Nevada tonight. You can see there's just 3% of precincts reporting. So we still have to wait for a lot of good information to come out of Nevada, but that's 6 electoral votes.
All right, take a quick look at a live shot there. Joe Biden, his campaign telling us that he will speak somewhere after 11:30. It's 11:34, almost 11:35. No sign of Joe Biden. Expected to be somewhat of a enthusiastic rah-rah type speech to those following his presidential run across the country.
And we'll take that live when he does speak. Let's take a look at some of the congressional races in Minnesota. A lot of money has been spent. A lot of them are very competitive, and a lot of them have not been called at this hour. Let's take a look at the 1st congressional district. The incumbent Jim Hagedorn running against Dan Feehan, a rematch from 2 years ago. And Hagedorn is leading right now.
Talk about too close to call. Minnesota District 2, Angie Craig and Tyler Kistner both settling in at 47%. This one was going to go on for quite some time, but we will watch it every step of the way.
In the 3rd district, this was called quite some time ago for Dean Phillips, the incumbent. Interesting, though, in two years ago, he was able to flip what had been traditionally a very red district, and he will keep his seat.
Minnesota District 4, Betty McCollum, longtime incumbent there, DFL side, and Jean Rex-Ziegel, the Republican right there. Betty McCollum, this was not expected to be too much of a challenge, and it's shaping up to be just that.
The 5th district has been called in Minneapolis. Ilhan Omar, the incumbent, with a big win tonight. She will keep her seat.
Minnesota District 6 also considered not a big challenge for Tom Emmer, the Republican, Tanya Zaradke, the DFLer, and as you can see there, Tom Emmer will keep his seat in Congress.
The 7th congressional district, we just talked about this one, Colin Peterson, the incumbent, and he's trailing right now against Michelle Fischbach.
In District 8, Pete Stauber, the Republican, challenged by Quinn Nystrom, the newcomer to politics. Right there you can see it, Pete Stauber with 55% of the vote and Nystrom with 40%.
Let's take a look at Wisconsin. District 3 for the U.S. House there. Ron Kind, the incumbent, is leading right now. He's facing Derek Van Orden, who is a former Navy SEAL and author.
We are watching for Joe Biden. You can see his motorcade there making its way to where he will deliver some remarks tonight. May be a while yet, but this is Joe Biden. The context of the speech is expected to be what often happens in a national race like this, and that is the candidate will come out well before the race has been called to sort of rally the troops, remind them that this race is still very much in play, and we're expecting that's exactly what Joe Biden will do. It's a very tight race when you look at the electoral votes shaping up in Minnesota right now. You can see that it is anybody's race right now. There are paths for both candidates to get to 270.
But there are those indications that we'll be waiting quite some time for results in Michigan and Wisconsin and North Carolina. So this could be a long haul type of deal as we wait for those results to come in, those states, Pennsylvania as well. But he will address the crowd, and we'll take that live as soon as he's ready to speak.
Catherine, as a political science professor at the U of M, these kind of speeches, sometimes they take place well after midnight, well after the results, but this one is happening at a time when this race is still very much in flux. Purpose of a speech from Joe Biden like this would be what?
Well, I think it's likely that he will just encourage his supporters and his detractors to wait patiently while all the votes are counted. It's pretty clear that there's not going to be a result tonight, and so he's speaking to the crowds that have gathered to support him, and just will likely urge everyone to be patient until the votes are all counted and in.
Do you think we'll hear from the president tonight?
He could pursue a similar strategy. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Theo Keith. Theo, you've got the electoral map shaping up there as we watch this. Again, this is a race. You sort of laid this out early for us in the evening, what it would take for these candidates to get to 270. It's very interesting to us and probably to many of our viewers how close to 2016 this map resembles.
Yes, and so this speech that Joe Biden is about to make, it's going to be interesting. I'm very curious to hear what he has to say. This is very unlike the moment when Hillary Clinton came out in 2016, when it was pretty clear she had lost, but said we got to wait to see the final results tomorrow. This is much different than that. It is not at all clear that Joe Biden has lost. He is right in the thick of this. This race is going to turn pretty much on a knife's edge. We look at the electoral map. Joe Biden did not do what he wanted to, which was to get an early, clear, and convincing lead. The states that he would have needed to pick up in order to do that would have been, starting with Florida, certainly, Ohio, Iowa would have been a stretch, Texas would have been a stretch as well. Any one of those would have given Joe Biden a pretty clear and convincing road to the White House tonight, where we could have been declaring a victory. So, okay, now you go to a second tier of Joe Biden pickup states. That would be Georgia and North Carolina. These are states that President Trump won 4 years ago. They haven't been called yet, but President Trump is leading in both of the states right now. Okay, so the Biden camp, if you're them, you say, well, maybe we won't pick up the second tier of states. We got to go to the third tier of states. And oh, by the way, they have been helped by this result right here, Arizona. But the third tier of states is the Midwestern states that A, the polls close later, B, they're having some trouble counting because of absentee ballot counting rules that we've gone through, and C, may not have results until tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday, and that would be right here, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And those are the three states that Joe Biden is looking at right now. Option 1, Florida, Texas, and the rest didn't work out. Option 2, Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona, well, mixed bag there. So he's got to go to option 3, and that's the Midwest.
And Catherine, this is shaping up as we watch the popular vote versus the electoral votes. This is shaping up also very similar to 2016 in that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but did not win the race to 270 in the Electoral College. I think Joe Biden right now is up in electoral and popular, but it could very well go that he could win the popular and not win this race.
Right, that is possible. And Democrats have big edges in states like California and the West Coast. And the winner-take-all nature of the Electoral College makes this, of course, possible, where a candidate can win a state very narrowly, but of course get all of the Electoral College votes in 48 states. And again, because the states are so close, I think we won't know the Electoral College vote winner for a couple days. And then it's also, of course, we're looking to Maine and Nebraska's single congressional district Electoral College votes as well, because they could come into play.
All right, you're watching the scene in Wilmington, Delaware right now, and Joe Biden is at the podium, so let's listen in.
Hello. Good evening. Your patience is commendable. We knew this was going to go long, but who knew we're going to go into maybe tomorrow morning, maybe even longer. But look, we feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted. But we're feeling good. We're feeling good about where we are. We believe one of the nets has suggested we've already won Arizona, but we're confident about Arizona. That's a turnaround. We also just called it for Minnesota, and we're still in the game in Georgia, although that's not one we expected. And we're feeling real good about Wisconsin and Michigan. And by the way, it's going to take time to count the votes, but we're going to win Pennsylvania. I've been talking to the folks in Philly, Allegheny County, Scranton, and they're really encouraged by the turnout and what they see. Look, we could know the results as early as tomorrow morning, but it may take a little longer. As I've said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people. But I'm optimistic about this outcome. And I want to thank every one of you who came out and voted in this election. And by the way, Chris Coons and the Democrats, congratulations here in Delaware. Pardon me? Hey, John, the Gov, yeah, the whole team, man. You've done a great job. I'm grateful to the poll workers, to our volunteers, our canvassers, everyone who participated in this democratic process. And I'm grateful to all of my supporters here in Delaware and all across the nation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And folks, you heard me say it before. Every time I walk out of my grandpa's house up in Scranton, he'd yell, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandma, when she was alive, yelled, "No, Joey, spread it. Keep the faith, guys. We're going to win this." Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your patience is great. Let's walk over here.
All right, Joe Biden and his wife Jill addressing a crowd there. You can hear people have gathered in their cars. You can hear the honking of the horns tonight in Wilmington, Delaware.
This went down exactly as we thought it might. It's a bit of an enthusiastic, encouraging type speech. Joe Biden indicating through much of that very short speech that this is going to go on for quite some time. And he's probably not wrong about that, Theo Keith, as we look at how that map is shaping up for both candidates. The states that are in question are the ones that also are probably the slowest on returns.
That's right. And Joe Biden's last line there was the most important one to his supporters. Keep the faith up, because they're not going to get results they're not going to get a winner in some of these states until potentially tomorrow, Thursday or Friday. He said he feels good about the outcome in Wisconsin and Michigan, two of the states, as we've run through. These are two states that he's got to win. 1, 2, and 3 here. Whoever it is who wins this presidency is going to win 2 of these 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. Biden saying in that speech he feels good about Wisconsin and Michigan.
All right, thanks, Theo. You know, Catherine, this has been a complicated year with the pandemic, the death of George Floyd, social unrest, and a presidential election. And I think people had mentally prepared themselves that this would be a complicated election, too.
That's right. And Joe Biden is telling his supporters to keep the faith, be patient. He feels good about where they are. This election is still too close to call. And so both candidates have a potential path to 270. And I think it's wise to urge patience and just to keep counting the votes.
And as we look at the electoral map there, Joe Biden with 237 and Donald Trump with 213. Again, the path for both candidates still fairly clear. They each, as Theo just pointed out, need to win 2 of the 3 if you look at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And North Carolina and Georgia, at least at this point, are tipping toward President Trump. Again, those are not over. Again, it takes time to get through both of these states in terms of their votes. Georgia had some issues tonight in a suburb of Atlanta when they were counting some mail-in absentee ballots. They had a water main break there
at the arena,
which slowed them down significantly. In fact, they said they couldn't count anymore until tomorrow. So again, those states, those 5 states, really hold the key to this presidential election.
You know, one thing that we don't know the answer to this just yet, but Nevada has been really slow to issue their returns. And we'll try to keep looking into that and to see why the numbers are so slow coming out of Nevada tonight. But that is the state that Hillary Clinton did win in 2016. And I know both candidates have spent some time there, would like to pick up those 6 electoral votes.
All right, let's take a look at where those electoral votes, look at the big picture now. We're going to take you through electoral votes. We're going to take you through popular vote, beginning with the electoral votes, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Right now, Joe Biden, as we just said, 237 to 213. It is the road to 270.
All right, let's take a look at the popular vote as it stands right now. You have Joe Biden with a slight lead in the popular vote.
In Minnesota, the popular vote, somewhat irrelevant right now because that state has been called for Joe Biden, but there it stands right there, getting 54% to 44%, a wider margin, I think, than the Trump campaign would have anticipated.
And in Wisconsin, a critical swing state. This is a state that the president won in 2016. Right now, he's leading, but again, with Wisconsin, the numbers are slow to come in, and they don't anticipate being able to project a winner until tomorrow.
In the U.S. Senate here in Minnesota, that race, Tina Smith, the incumbent, Jason Lewis. This one was down to 7 percentage points. It's widened back out now to 8 percentage points, 50% to 42%, and reporting about 75% of the precincts reporting in.
And some really important congressional seats up for grabs. This is the 1st district in southern Minnesota. Jim Hagedorn, the incumbent, is leading this race right now.
All right, and in the District 2, Angie Craig, Tyler Kistner. I'm telling you, folks, this one hasn't moved an inch since about an hour ago, 47% to 47%.
In the 7th congressional district, this is a seat that the GOP wanted to flip, and Michelle Fischbach does have a lead right now. She is speaking to a crowd in the 7th district.
We are so excited. We started this thing and we said, no, we're going to do it this year. We're going to do it this year. We spent time convincing everybody we were going to do it, and we did. And it is amazing. It is amazing. And I'm at a little loss for words because you plan out your concession speech and you plan that out so you say the right thing. But you know what? You just say, this is awesome.
Burn it.
Burn it, burn it, burn it. No, I didn't even take it out of my purse. Didn't even take it out of my purse. But I just want to say this was such a wonderful team effort. Craig Bishop, Daryl Thurn, Baker, Paul Hopper, all of these guys. And I'm sorry if I missed somebody because it's just, it was such a team effort and everybody worked. And you guys, a 30-year incumbent, this is going to be national news because we were able to do this. And we're still waiting on the last numbers for Trump, but I believe that we are going to be able to do that too because this country needs him. And 4 more years, absolutely.
4 more years. 4 more years.
But we will wait until it's official, but like I said, there isn't a way that he can make this up at this point. And so again, thank you. And I promise I will pull up my bootstraps and I will work hard in Washington, D.C. and I will make sure that our conservative views are represented with a strong voice in Washington, D.C. and that we take that forward. I don't know exactly where the numbers are for the U.S. House yet and who will be in control there, but I promise, and I have all along, I will not vote for Nancy Pelosi. And hopefully we will be able to regain the House. I don't know what those numbers are yet, but again, I just want to say thank you because this is so humbling that I had so much support and people were out there in the warm and the cold, because it started to get cold, now it's warm again, but helping us out and just doing the door knocking, doing the phone calls, doing everything that needed to be done to make sure that we all could share this night. And so thank you again, and it's getting late, so if you want to go home now and look in the morning what happens with President Trump, but thank you. Thank you, sir.
The former Lieutenant Governor, Michelle Fischbach, talking to those in attendance at her headquarters tonight, somewhat claiming victory, but she did encourage her followers there to go home and rest on it and see what happens tomorrow. There is the number right there, 53% to 40%. If she wins, she would knock out a almost 30-year incumbent in Colin Peterson on the Democratic side.
The 8th Congressional District in the northern part of the state, and this race has been called for Pete Stauber, the incumbent tonight. He was running against Quinn Nystrom.
Another race we can call in Iowa, Joni Ernst, the Republican incumbent against Teresa Greenfield. Joni Ernst will retain her seat in the state of Iowa. Catherine Pearson joining us now, professor at the U of M politics. Catherine, this one was close, and it was, at least was projected to be close. It started out close. This was a race that the Senate really, really wanted to keep.
That's right. This race was actually considered to be a toss-up race, with Republican Joni Ernst defending her seat, and keeping her seat was really helpful for Republicans in their quest to maintain majority party control of the Senate, and it makes it much more likely that that will happen.
And I think this also was one of those races that was sort of an example of how were the farmers going to feel about the tariffs and the 4 years of Trump presidency, and now Iowa's been called, the Senate race has been called, so it gives us some indication of just what the mood is.
And we do know, just hang on for 1 second, Catherine, we do know that the president, we're being told, will speak tonight, much in the fashion that Joe Biden just did. We're holding on for that, we're holding out for that, and when he does speak, we will of course go to that.
Okay, so back to Iowa again. There was some question, with Iowa polling showing some, a closer race for both the Senate and the president there. What would be the reaction of farmers across our country?
Right, and with 4 years ago, we saw that no Senate race went differently than their state did at the presidential level, and I suspect that we will see that tonight. We may not see that in Montana. That race is still very close, and Montana is going red at the presidential level, but in general, there is less split ticket voting than there used to be.
Speaking of split ticket voting, Theo Keith, you've been watching that very closely tonight as well. Weigh in on what you're seeing on that front.
Well, let's first go back to that Michelle Fischbach speech. She claimed victory there, and I would tend to agree with her analysis. It would be very difficult to see Colin Peterson, a 30-year incumbent, making up a 34,000 vote deficit with 75% of precincts in. So it looks like Republicans are going to pick up that seat, one they had tried to pick up for many years. Looks like they're going to be happy, at least in that race. Let's talk about the 2nd Congressional District race as well. You talk about ticket splitting, and here's an example of that. 2nd Congressional District is centered around Dakota County in the South Metro. President Trump lost Dakota County with 68% in by 14,000 votes. Tyler Kistner, the Republican candidate for U.S. House, the challenger to Angie Craig, losing Dakota County by only 4,000 votes. This is what Republicans had in mind. They said if President Trump doesn't win Minnesota, if he performs poorly in Minnesota, especially in the suburbs, we at least hope suburban voters will still vote for down-ballot Republicans. And at least for Kistner, that seems to be the case. That's why he is hanging in this race. You can see there the numbers pretty much a dead heat right now, with still some of the vote left. I also want to mention in Dakota County, there is an issue. They've had some problems counting ballots, absentee ballots specifically. They've had no problem counting the in-person Election Day ballots, and they've had no problem counting some of the absentee ballots from previous days. But they now say they will not be able to count all of the absentee ballots until tomorrow. That means that we will not have all Dakota County results in until tomorrow. What does that mean? Well, very little in the presidential race. Joe Biden has already won Minnesota. Dakota County's remaining absentee votes don't matter in the presidential race, but they do potentially in the 2nd congressional district race, which is a dead heat between Angie Craig and Tyler Kistner, the Republican challenger. Again, Dakota County saying they will not have all of their absentee ballots counted until sometime tomorrow.
Going back to the 2nd congressional district there and talking about Tyler Kistner, he did try to maintain a very independent sort of image for a long time in his political advertising. For the longest time, he didn't say he was running in the 2nd congressional district, and he didn't say which party he was running for. So
that's what he said. Yeah. Send in the Marine. So that was an attempt to play up his biography and not necessarily his party. You saw the exact opposite from Michelle Fischbach in the 7th congressional district, a district President Trump won by 31 percentage points in 2016. Her entire race was spent on saying she was the Republican in this race. Colin Peterson was the Democrat, and hoping people made the choice between them based on that. And at least as far as the results that are in already, that seems to have worked for Fischbach.
All right. Well, let's check in District 1 down there in Mankato, where we positioned Maury Glover tonight. Earlier, he spoke to Jim Hagedorn, the Republican incumbent down there, being challenged by Dan Feehan. He has Jim Hagedorn again, and Hagedorn has held on to his lead for all of this evening to this point. Maury, what do you have to say?
Well, yes, we're outside at Charlie's, and it was pretty packed in there earlier, but things have kind of trickled out. A lot of folks have trickled out. Things have calmed down a little bit, but we just wanted to check in with the congressman and see how he's feeling as the night, we're approaching midnight now. So just had a couple of quick questions for you. First, are you prepared for a long night tonight?
Well, hopefully not too much longer. We'll see. Some of the key precincts have been coming in. Things look pretty good, but until the vote is tallied, I don't take anything for granted.
Is there anything particular in your campaign you think that was a turning point, that where things kind of looked good for you and you thought you had a decent shot for winning?
Yeah, it's always going to be a tough race. I mean, they put $10 million against us, but I think the fact that I just kept working the district, getting around, meeting people in person, that had a difference. My opponent really didn't do that, and I think in the end, the personal campaigning, the retail campaigning, it's always been a hallmark of mine. I think they made a difference. But, you're seeing some stuff across the country. You're seeing some Democrats. The head of the Democrat Congressional Committee, Sherry Bustos, is this close to losing. Republicans are picking up seats in the House. The Senate looks, could be 50-50. It's tough. And the president looks like he's in a pretty good position to win re-election. So, overall, I think it's been a pretty nice night. I wish Jason Lewis had done a little better. He ran a great campaign. He's terrific. I feel bad about that. And, of course, the president coming up a little short in Minnesota. But the state party chair, my wife, Jennifer Carnahan, boy, they left it all on the table. They've been working the state so hard, and it helped us a lot in this district.
How long are you prepared to, or how long are you prepared to stay here tonight, or how confident are you that your race will?
Well, in 16 with Walz, before he was governor, we went all the way to about 8 in the morning. Last time in 18, I think we won it at about 4 or 5 in the morning. Hopefully, maybe in the next hour or two. We'll see. We'll keep going.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Congressman. Appreciate you chatting with us. So again, things kind of status quo for right now. We knew it was going to be a late night with this race, but the last contest between these two only being by 1,300 votes, and is turning out to be a close one as well. But for now, we'll send it back to you.
Yeah, it was really close 2 years ago. All right. Thanks, Maury Glover, with Jim Hagedorn tonight.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, right?
Right now, things
in some ways
in the swing states kind of staying the same right now.
All right, let's take a look at those key swing states right now. Minnesota, 10 electoral votes. We know where that one went. That one's already projected to go to Joe Biden. He's added that to his tally already tonight.
And Wisconsin, where they've told us, they probably will not have a projected winner until tomorrow at the earliest, as they count absentee ballots, 10 electoral votes, and the president is leading right now in Wisconsin.
Michigan also not a called state yet tonight, 54% to 45%. Donald Trump in the lead there. More precincts are reporting in, but again, that one is still not called here in the Midwest.
And in Ohio, that state has been called for President Trump with its 18 electoral votes.
Pennsylvania hanging out there with those 20 electoral votes. This one also not expected to be called for quite some time because of so many ballot counting outside of today voting. Right now, though, Donald Trump maintains a 15% lead over Joe Biden.
Florida always gets a lot of attention in a presidential election year. This state with its 29 electoral votes has been called for Donald Trump.
Arizona's 11 electoral votes went to Donald Trump earlier in the evening, 53% to 46%.
And let's take a look at Texas, 38 electoral votes, and the state did have some polling that showed a tighter race, but traditionally a red state, and it was called for Donald Trump.
Georgia has not been called, 16 electoral votes in the state of Georgia. Right now, Donald Trump leading Joe Biden by 5 percentage points.
And in Iowa, 6 electoral votes, and the president will take Iowa tonight.
North Carolina with 15 electoral votes. That one exceedingly close. They show all the precincts reporting in, but again, that probably does not take into account those mail-in ballots and those absentee ballots that are yet to be counted in the state of North Carolina.
Virginia called pretty early tonight for Joe Biden with its 13 electoral votes.
And in Nevada, again, this is one that's been hanging out there for quite some time. Only 3% of the precincts reporting in, but at this point, Donald Trump is ahead handily, but this is a state that Hillary Clinton won pretty handily in 2016. Joe Biden is expected to win Nevada, but right now that's how it's shaping up.
Yeah, we just need to figure out why it's been so slow to send in numbers tonight. All right, let's take a look at the electoral votes. Let's give you the totals right now. This is, of course, a race to 270. Right now, Joe Biden with 237, President Trump with 213, a very close race when you look at the electoral votes.
And how does that equate to the popular vote? Pretty much dead on, 50% to Joe Biden and 49% for the president right now on the popular vote across the country.
State of Minnesota called a little while ago for Joe Biden with 54% of the votes.
Catherine Pearson, a 10% difference there in Minnesota. I don't think either campaign would have projected that. What's your take on that here in Minnesota?
That's right. I'm surprised that it was that wide, given how close it was 4 years ago, and given the fact that both campaigns really took Minnesota seriously as a competitive state in 2020. And I think, as Theo has explained to us throughout the night, that the very high turnout in the metro area really helped Biden, and Democrats in that area as well, but certainly helped Biden in Minnesota with that big edge.
Of course, we're still waiting for Wisconsin to be called, but what have some of the shifts been in Wisconsin in the last 4 years?
Well, I think what we will see how many votes are still left in the Milwaukee area, the Green Bay area, and what ultimately happens. I think that when those votes are counted, we'll have the story of Wisconsin, and it remains to be seen whether or not it's a similar story to Minnesota, sort of big turnout in the most urban areas of the state.
All right, well, let's look at Wisconsin. You're seeing it there. And let's move on now to U.S. Senate here in Minnesota. That's a race that we've been watching very closely. Again, 50% going to the incumbent Tina Smith right now, 43% to the challenger Jason Lewis.
And in the U.S. House, District 1, southern part of the state, you heard from Jim Hagedorn. He was with Maury Glover just a while ago saying might just go ahead and call it a night and wait until tomorrow, but he is leading in this race, and this district is always very competitive and close.
Talk about competitive. How about District 2? Angie Craig, the incumbent there, Tyler Kistner. Right now, Craig is taking a 2 percentage lead over Tyler Kistner. That is a change from just a few minutes ago when both were sitting at 47%.
That will be one to watch. And in the 7th district, Michelle Fischbach did address a crowd a while ago, and it sounded like she was claiming victory. She does have a pretty big lead, but this race has not been called yet.
In Minnesota District 8, that's up to the northern part of Minnesota. Pete Stauber, the Republican incumbent, the projected winner there with 55% of the vote over Quinn Nystrom with 39% of the vote.
All right, and we are expecting to hear from the president at some point. We heard from Joe Biden addressing a crowd in Wilmington, Delaware just a little while ago, and So we'll let you know as soon as we hear word on when the president might speak.
Thea, what are you seeing there? I noticed we just saw a slight shift with Angie Craig and Tyler Kistner. That was 47-47, now gone to 48-46. The precinct's reporting in over 50% now. Yeah. That one's still very close.
Yeah, it is. And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we may not have that race called until potentially tomorrow because of these absentee ballots in Dakota County that they are struggling to count. They said they would be able to count tonight all of the in-person votes from today and many of the absentee votes, but they would not have all of the absentee ballots counted until sometime tomorrow. So you see there, Angie Craig has bumped up her lead. It was razor thin, and it's still razor thin. There's a long time to go in this race. It's not going to be called anytime soon.
Well, and then there's the complicated issues that go along with this race because third-party candidate passed away in September.
Yep.
The race was initially moved to February, then a judge moved it back to the November ballot. In the meantime, there are some questions about whether or not people voted with their absentee ballots, thinking that it would be on the ballot in November. So there's going to be some legal challenges here.
And didn't Tyler Kistner, didn't he basically say that I'm going to challenge this no matter what?
In fact, it's on the court docket in the federal appeals court for after the election. So basically, the federal judges said, we're going to let this election play out. It's too close to the election to do anything about it right now. This was a couple of weeks ago, but they have scheduled arguments in this case for within the next couple of weeks. So this particular race, while it was ran and voted on tonight, it will still play out in court after the election, and we'll see, I would hate to speculate on what a court might do, but potentially they might order a do-over. Mm-hmm. Or they might say the results on November 3rd are the results on November 3rd, and we'll take those going forward.
All right, let's take...
Well, I was just going to have Catherine dig into that 7th district a little bit, Catherine. I think that the margin of victory there, if in fact Michelle Fischbach holds on, she's claiming victory. We don't have an official designation for a victory there yet, but does that race surprise you in terms of the margin that she could potentially win by?
Well, actually not really, despite the fact that Peterson is a 30-year incumbent. He is chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and so clearly many constituents are affected by that. But yet it is a district that went for Trump by over 30 points 4 years ago. And as more and more voters are not splitting their ticket, it was going to be hard for him to hang on with a quality challenger. And by and large, he's avoided challengers who've been able to raise a lot of money who are well known to voters. And Michelle Fischbach raised a lot of money, a former state senator, of course, had represented some constituents in the district, briefly lieutenant governor. And so she was well known, had a lot of party support, a lot of outside spending, raised a lot of money. And so she just presented a much more formidable challenge to Peterson, and in a presidential year with high turnout and Republicans turning out in the district to vote at the presidential level.
You mentioned the money, $17,297,000 were spent on that race. Both candidates spending well over $1.7, $1.8 million, and then outside money came in, and this was really the difference, I think, that you're pointing out. $13 million of outside money came into that race.
Right. Both parties saw this as an extremely competitive race that they wanted to win.
All right, Catherine, stay with us here. We're going to go to some state legislative races. Complicated, challenging time right now. We have COVID. We have the death of George Floyd, social unrest, and the GOP holds a 3-seat majority in the Senate right now. The Democrats trying to flip some of those seats. So this is the District 44 region, Plymouth and Minnetonka. Right now, we do have a projected winner, Ann Johnson Stewart, with a pretty big lead.
All right, in District 56, Savage, Burnsville, Dan Hall, the Republican, versus Lindsay Port, the DFLer. Right now, Dan Hall winning over Port by some 12 percentage points.
District 58, Lakeville, Farmington, Matt Little, the DFL candidate, facing Zach Duckworth, and the projected winner is Zach Duckworth tonight.
Northern part of the city of Rochester down there, Dan Senjum, the Republican, Sarah Flick, the DFLer, Sanjum, the projected winner in that race.
Now let's take a look at District 27, Albert Lee and Austin, Dan Sparks, the DFL candidate, facing Gene Dornick, and right now we don't have this race has not been called, but Dornick does have quite a lead in that race.
In Maple Grove, District 34, Warren Limmer The Republican Bonnie Westland, the DFL, right now Limmer, the projected winner in District 34.
In District 38, White Bear Lake, Hugo Lino Lakes, Roger Chamberlain, the Republican, facing Justin Stoufferant. And right now, Chamberlain has a pretty big lead, but nobody has been called for this race.
East Metro, Washington County, Stillwater, Karn, Housley, the incumbent Republican, Josiah Hill, the DFL, right now Housley winning by 6 percentage points, with most precincts reporting in.
And then some of these really competitive districts for the State House. District 5A in Bemidji. This was a really close race 2 years ago, and it's a rematch. You have John Purcell, the incumbent, facing Matt Bliss. And right now, Purcell has he's really trailing Matt Bliss at this point.
In 5B, this is an open seat left vacant by Sandy Lehman, Spencer Igo, and Joe Abeda. Igo, the Republican, Abeda, the Democrat. Right now, Igo winning handily up there in that District 5B.
District 54A, South St. Paul and Clapham, the DFL candidate facing Keith Franke. This is another rematch, and this race has been called for Keith Franke.
District 55A there in Shakopee, Brad Tabke, the DFLer, Eric Mortensen, the Republican, and Mortensen, the Republican, winning over the incumbent right now, 50% to 41%.
Savage 56A, you have Jessica Hansen, the DFL candidate, Pam Myra, the Republican. Right now, Myra does have a pretty big lead.
An open seat in District 56B, Lakeville-Burnsville area. Kayla Berg, the DFLer, Roz Peterson, the Republican. Right now, Roz Peterson, the projected winner. That's in District 56B, Lakeville-Burnsville area.
All right, let's take a look at the balance of power with Theo Keith. And Theo, if you can also talk about what the mood has been like at the legislature. It's been a very difficult year on a number of fronts, and there has been, some butting of heads at the state legislature with the governor.
So here's why this is important tonight. Next year, there's going to be a whole boatload of important issues to tackle. The state's going to have a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit. The state's still going to have to handle the coronavirus pandemic. And there's going to be redistricting for the next 10 years. How the district lines are going to be drawn. Will they advantage one party or the other? Democrats are going to have at least one seat at that table with Governor Tim Walz. He's in office for another 2 years. Will they have the trifecta? Will they have the House and the Senate as well? Or will Republicans be able to counter Walz? Right now, Republicans hold only one slice of power in the state House, and that is the Senate, and by a tenuous 2-seat majority. It's 35-32. They can only afford to lose one seat. If they lose two, then they lose the majority. And right now, well, they've lost one seat. That seat in Plymouth has gone to Democrats, but vulnerable Republicans, at least as of now, with potentially some late arriving absentee ballots in the next few days to come in, Republicans have appeared to hold on to some districts they were vulnerable in. Both of the Rochester area Senate districts they have held, the Maple Grove Senate district they have held. As of now, with one precinct left, they are holding the Lino Lakes and Stillwater Senate districts. These are all districts that Democrats had hoped to pick up. So Republicans, while they have lost the presidential race here in Minnesota, they can at least take some solace in the fact that they are holding, as of right now, a lot of the Senate districts that they were vulnerable in. By the way, one note on the other side, Minnesota Senate Democratic leader, the minority leader, Susan Kent, she has held on to her seat in Woodbury, it appears, tonight. Republicans had targeted her. Big question for Kent is, will she be minority leader or majority leader come January?
A lot to digest there, Theo. Again, and much of this, as we've said throughout the evening, will not be determined until tomorrow or even later in some of these areas.
That's true, although I will say we may have a pretty good handle on the balance of power in the Senate tonight. Results continue to trickle in. I was kind of pessimistic 30 to 45 minutes ago that we would have many races with all precincts in, and now we seem to be getting those. Again, one caveat to that is late arriving absentee ballots will be counted over the next 7 days, so we will not see final results until November 10th. And this is difficult to comprehend. It's very complicated, but they're being set aside in the presidential race in case they're later challenged, these late arriving absentee ballots. But the 8th Circuit ruling seems to suggest that they will count in down ballot races, including state Senate districts as of right now. Again, with courts, this could all change.
Right. And
Very
we don't know
much.
how many of those absentee ballots will come in
That's right.
because we have to wait a couple days to see what the
Exactly.
numbers look like.
All right, Theo, thank you so much. Let's take a look at some of those top races around the country right now. Of course, starting with U.S. President, electoral votes is the one to watch. Let's take a look at that as we go through this. We'll show you the big map as well as how the votes are shaping up right now in that race to 270. Joe Biden with 237 and Donald Trump with 213.
And those numbers just kind of staying the same right now as we wait for some of those critical swing states. The popular vote, let's take a look at that. And Joe Biden leading in the popular vote right now.
Minnesota, a foregone conclusion here. The popular vote shaped up like this, 54% to 44%. Joe Biden, 10% lead over President Trump, and that stayed in that same zone most of the evening. That is a wider margin of win for Joe Biden in Minnesota than most expected.
We won't see a projected winner in Wisconsin probably until tomorrow, and that would be the earliest. But right now, the president is leading in Wisconsin. This is a state that he carried in 2016, and we'll wait to see what happens there as they continue to count their absentee ballots.
That U.S. Senate race here in Minnesota, pitting Tina Smith against Jason Lewis. Tina Smith, it appears she will retain. It's not been called. She's maintained a 7 to sometimes 12% lead over Jason Lewis most of the evening. Right now it sits at 7 percentage points.
And Catherine, you had brought up the fact that a lot of these Senate races are following what happens in the presidential race in each of the states. And there are a lot of big Senate races. I mean, millions. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent on these Senate races.
Oh, it's just extraordinary. The amount of campaign spending and then independent spending on Senate races. And actually, even though Minnesota's Senate race was competitive, it wasn't even in the top 10 nationally in terms of level of competition. So just a very competitive year nationwide for the Senate because, of course, majority party control was really up in the air.
Which was the most vulnerable? Remind our viewers as they look at those balance of power maps throughout the night in terms of the U.S. Senate, which did you see as most vulnerable in that race? And by the way, Tina Smith just called in this race. You can see that, Catherine, 50% to 43%. We just went through those numbers moments ago. It wasn't called. It is now called. She will retain her Senate seat. one of the states that Theo and Catherine have pointed out all night long to keep a close eye on. Slow reporting in Michigan by other standards, 54% to 45% for Donald Trump.
And Catherine, let's bring you in here on Michigan because explain the situation there with absentee ballots and why we might have to wait a while to see a projected winner in Michigan.
Well, because they will continue to count them as they arrive in Michigan. And so given how close it is, until all of the votes are counted, they won't be able to declare a winner until it's impossible for one of the other candidates to overtake a lead. But I wanted to circle back to the Electoral College path. So there is another option, and that is that both candidates get 269, an Electoral College tie. If Biden gets Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada, but not that Omaha Congressional District Electoral College vote from Nebraska. And in that case, each congressional delegation from the House would have one vote. Not each member of the House, but each congressional delegation.
Catherine, I think I have to jump in on that because I think Joe Biden just was called for that one electoral vote in Nebraska. As we look at the electoral map right now, you can see that one in the center there. And again, Nebraska splits its electoral votes based on the popular vote. And in that middle district right there, it has gone blue to Joe Biden. Theo just pointed out a path that would include that for Joe Biden. Would also include the state of Nevada, which he is projected to, or it is thought that Joe Biden would win based on the 2016 election where Hillary Clinton won Nevada. Interesting.
So that makes things very interesting.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier, how Nebraska gets to call the shots on how it divides up its electoral votes, and tonight it's seemingly making a difference.
Yes, although I am relieved that we won't necessarily have this 269 to 269 dynamic. That would definitely wind up in the courts.
Interesting stuff. All right. Let's pick up with the state of Michigan with its 16 electoral votes. Michigan there, Donald Trump leading by 9 percentage points over Joe Biden in the state of Michigan.
Ohio called quite some time ago for the president. That was a big win for the GOP.
Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes. As our analysts have pointed out, and the national political analysts also point out, this is going to be a long one, folks, although Donald Trump with a wider margin as the night goes on, 57% to 42% in the state of Pennsylvania.
And in Florida, this was called quite some time ago, 29 electoral votes, and the president picked up Florida tonight.
Arizona called about an hour and a half ago with its electoral votes going to Joe Biden. That was a flip. Arizona going blue this time around, 53% to 46%.
Texas with 38 electoral votes, pretty much traditionally a red state, and the president picks up Texas.
And in Georgia, this one has not been called tonight, 16 electoral votes, but Donald Trump has maintained a 5 percentage point lead in the state of Georgia for most of the evening right now. You can see 92% of the precincts reporting in Georgia.
And Iowa, 6 electoral votes. Those will go to President Trump.
North Carolina, 15 electoral votes. This one is very, very tight. It's been like this all evening long. You can see only 1 percentage point separating Donald Trump leading over Joe Biden.
Virginia, 13 electoral votes. This was called pretty early in the night for Joe Biden.
And in Nevada, that's the one that people will wait on tonight. 6 electoral votes. Right now, Joe Biden winning by 5 percentage points over Donald Trump with less than half of the precincts reporting in.
All right, we are going to join Fox News coverage here in a couple of minutes. We want to get your final thoughts, though, Theo and Catherine, as we sort of close the book on tonight and wait to see what tomorrow will bring.
Well, if you want a thought for the night, it's Wisconsin, okay? Minnesota, Joe Biden did better than Hillary Clinton did, whether you count the 7-county metro here, St. Louis County, Olmsted County, Mankato. He outperformed. What does that mean next door in Wisconsin? We'll have to see. Milwaukee County alone, 200,000 votes that was in the 2016 presidential race, still hasn't been counted in 2020. We got to wait and see on Wisconsin.
All right. Final thoughts, Catherine. We've got to do it in about 40 seconds.
Well, that's right. So Wisconsin, of course, is critically important. But Biden couldn't get to 270 with just Wisconsin. He would need Michigan or Pennsylvania. And so, once again, just like 4 years ago, the upper Midwest is critically important. That's not to deny the fact that there are still some states in the South that haven't been called. But this upper Midwest battlefield, the candidates spent more time this time around, but I predict that they'll get even more attention 4 years from now.
All right. Well, we appreciate both of your insights tonight. It's been very, very helpful, and and our viewers have appreciated it as well.
And while we don't know how this election will end tonight, we will see tomorrow that perhaps Wisconsin may have a projected winner, and we'll continue to watch these swing states. Thank you so much for joining us for this coverage.
Going to send you to Fox News coverage live right now.